Chapter 347. After Zhang Yan captured Su Yihong, he naturally wasn't willing to lose the opportunity to destroy the flag door, so he let out a clear howl and flew with his sword, transforming into a ray of light that shot straight into the formation door. Just now, a fog flashed in front of him, and he couldn't tell the way forward. It was as if this kind of obstacle couldn't stop him at all. He took out the Star Sword orb and used a spell to open up a path. A cold light cut through the clouds and the turbid air, and it flew forward as if there was no one there. After traveling for about 5 miles, the fog in front of him opened up, and a formation platform that was 10 feet tall appeared. There was a tall decorated archway on top of it. It had eaves and corners, and it was 10 feet tall. It was made of jade, and the roof tiles were made of glass. It was crystal clear and eye-catching. At this moment, there was a group of people guarding the formation platform. There were about 40 to 50 of them, and most of them were at the Mystic Light realm. There were also a few core formation cultivators. Seeing Zhang Yan come over, a middle-aged Taoist who looked steady and mature walked out of the crowd. He bowed and said loudly, "Is the guru of Qinsong school here?" Seeing that they didn't have any hostility, Zhang Yan put away the sword light and looked around coldly. He said, "Who are you?" The middle-aged Taoist bowed respectfully and said, "Guru, we are all guests under the Su family. Just now, when Su Yihong left, he ordered us to guard this place, and he said that if any outsiders come, we must kill them." Zhang Yan looked at him and said with interest, "Then why didn't you follow his orders and attack when you saw me coming?" The middle-aged Taoist said loudly, "We are not blind and deaf. Right now, the people besieged outside are all disciples of the Qinsong school. This must be because the Su family has done something that angers the heavens and people. Just now, it has attracted fellow disciples to attack. We naturally do not wish to wallow in the mire with them." They were only the helpers that the Su clan had recruited on a daily basis and knew nothing about the clan's secrets. Moreover, most of them were rogue cultivators from outside the clan, and none of them were loyal to the Su clan. Of course, they were unwilling to be dragged into the fire pit by the Su clan for no reason. Zhang Yan let out a low laugh and said, "Lady Su has already committed the crime of deceiving her master and destroying her ancestors. If you don't want to die, you should know what to do." When the middle-aged Taoist heard this, he couldn't help but turn pale with fright. Whether it was the Shen Men or the demonic Tao, it was an extremely heavy crime. Anyone who dared to associate themselves with him would be tired of living for too long. He composed himself and angrily said, "So that's how it is, Lady Su has bullied me too much. If they are heartless, don't blame us for being unjust. These dozens of people weren't good people either." When they heard Zhang Yan's words, their hearts were clear. If they wanted to completely disassociate themselves from the Su clan, the only way was to attack. Zhang Yan waited for a moment. Seeing that they were still standing in the same place, he couldn't help but frown and say, "Why haven't you all left yet?" The middle-aged Taoist's face revealed an awkward expression and he said, "We don't know formations, so we can't easily leave this place. If we walk rashly, I'm afraid we'll be lost in the formation." Zhang Yan lifted his sleeve and pointed. He said, "Why don't we destroy this flag gate?" The middle-aged Taoist smiled bitterly and said, "This flag gate is very sturdy. I heard from the Su clan that when it was first built, a total of more than 90,000 pieces of green jade and 300 pieces of heavy wood were used. It was also inscribed with talisman restrictions. With our strength, I'm afraid we won't be able to do anything. Master, why don't you invite a Yuanying spiritual master to come here? He will definitely be able to break this gate." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's just a flag gate. Why would a spiritual master need to make a move? There's no need to go through so much trouble. I can handle it myself." When the middle-aged Taoist and the people behind him heard him speak so confidently, they didn't believe him in their hearts. It wasn't that they didn't secretly try before, but no matter how much strength they used to attack, the flag gate didn't budge an inch. How could it be destroyed by one person's strength? Zhang Yan didn't say much. He activated his Xian Qi, and in a split second, a ray of true light of the earth element came out and pressed on the flag gate. Then he activated his mana. As he continued to activate his Dan Fiend, the true light became heavier and heavier. In the end, it almost solidified, as if a real mountain was pressing down. Not long after, the flag gate started to creak and shake. Everyone present couldn't help but be shocked. After a while, the flag gate finally couldn't take it anymore. With a rumble, smoke and dust flew everywhere, and it actually collapsed. Once the flag gate was gone, the entire formation was broken, and the bewildering mist instantly dispersed. Above the sky, there was a clear sky once again. The middle-aged Taoist opened his mouth wide in shock. Just now, he came back to his senses. When he looked at Zhang Yan again, his eyes were filled with reverence. Zhang Yan said indifferently, "The flag formation is broken, all of you can go." How could these disciples dare to stay any longer? They cupped their hands at Zhang Yan and hurriedly flew away. All of them wanted to find a Su clan disciple to kill so that they could clear their names. On the flag platform, only Zhang Yan was left. He took out a beautiful piece of jade from his sleeve and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Su, go out and take a look. If you can find the location of the true Dragon Manor, you must think of a way to go in and take a look. If you succeed, there's no harm in me gifting your big brother's corporeal body to you." Su Yang couldn't help but be excited. If he had a corporeal body, then he wouldn't have to be a devil that didn't see the light of day. He immediately stood up from the jade and bowed. "I'll obey Master's orders." His figure shook and he circulated a technique. Instantly, 5 split souls flew out from the jade and flew in all directions, leaving only the main soul within the jade. These split souls were shapeless and formless, and they were strands of impure thoughts condensed from filthy yin qi. They couldn't harm others by themselves. But once they entered the body of another, they would be able to incite all sorts of distracting thoughts in one's heart at any time, and it would cause one to completely lose one's consciousness. To a disciple with an unstable disposition and weak will, it was truly difficult to resist. After the split souls left the jade, they were afraid of the radiance of the day, so they hid underground. 4 of the split souls didn't find anything even after searching for a long time. Only the 5th split soul unintentionally discovered an underground passageway that led to an unknown place. When it sensed the aura of a living person within it, it followed the passageway. After going down for who knows how many miles, Su Yang arrived at an underground palace. He floated to the end, but there was a stone door blocking his way. The split souls were shapeless and incorporeal, so it was natural for him to pass through the stone door. But just as he was about to move forward, he stopped. He faintly felt a sense of danger and guessed that it was some kind of talisman spell to defend against ghosts and devils. He instantly didn't dare to move forward. However, he wasn't willing to retreat just like that. Just as he was in a dilemma, he saw the stone door rumble open and a rather handsome child suddenly walked out. This child's cultivation was low and hadn't opened his meridians. His realm was far from Su Yang's, so he naturally couldn't sense his existence. The child searched the table for a while, as if he had taken something. After placing it in his bosom, he was about to return to the stone door. This was a rare opportunity, so Su Yang didn't think too much. He drilled into the child's body and then dove into the depths of his acupoints, shrinking as much as possible. However, what made him pleasantly surprised was that even though the child was young, he was like an adult. However, he was like an adult, with many distracting thoughts and complicated emotions. This was suitable for him to hide his tracks. The child suddenly felt like a cold wind was blowing on his body, and he couldn't help but shiver, shrinking his neck. He straightened his collar and walked inside. Hiding in his physical body, the restrictions stopped ringing and Su Yihong was able to safely pass through the door. Actually, a devil like him wouldn't be able to barge into the restrictions of Surging Waves Lake. Not to mention sneaking into this place. The reason why these few talismans were here was because of the habit of the person who built the cave, casually doing it. Actually, he didn't care much about it. Otherwise, if he had laid it out properly, he wouldn't have been able to enter this underground palace. The child returned to the hall. He passed through 2 more layers of palaces before standing still and bowing towards the 5 Daoran people. 5 old ancestors. Grandson has seen clearly that Dalong and third uncle's life tablets have cracked. Su Yang's heart trembled. Although he didn't dare to look outside, He knew that the only people in the sect who could be called old ancestors were the 5 Yuanying elders. Back then, his cultivation wasn't enough. He had seen these 5 elders from afar, and that was with Su Yihong. Just now, at this moment, he didn't dare to make any movements, doing his best to shrink his soul, afraid that he would be seen through. An old and tired voice rang out. Who would have thought that Dalang wouldn't even last a day before dying? Outside the cave, there's probably no one guarding. AI, if it was 100 years ago, how would it be like this? Just as he finished speaking, someone said in a low voice, "Today is a calamity for our Su family. Since we can't leave, we'll just have to die with our clan." At this time, a slightly hoarse voice rang out, saying urgently, "Third brother, we can't delay any longer, we have to make a decision." Su Yihong didn't understand what these people were talking about, but he guessed that these people were probably planning how to escape. There was an indescribable joy in his heart, and he thought to himself, "To think that you guys were so high up in the past, who would have thought that there would be a day like this?" The old voice sighed and said, "Su Yihua, come over." Su Yang felt that the boy he was possessing acknowledged and walked forward. At this moment, he didn't dare to move at all, afraid that he would be discovered. The boy stood in front of a benevolent-looking Daoran. This Daoran looked at him carefully, stretched out his hand, and pinched his body a few times. He nodded and said, "Not bad, the spirit root and the bones are beautiful. The person who chose you to come here was thoughtful, but it's a pity that you're too smart, so your emotions are too complicated. If you were to train for a few more years, it would be fine, but there's no such chance now." At this moment, there was a sudden tremor, and a handful of dust fell from the top. The hoarse voice anxiously said, "Third brother, what are you waiting for? If you don't act now, it'll be too late." The Daoran sighed and said, "Forget it, the matter is urgent. Grandson, go and get that magic sword." The boy obeyed and walked to the east wall. He took a quaint magic sword from the wall and came down. The Daoran said again, "Go and stand at your 9th great-uncle's place." The boy didn't dare to disobey. Like a marionette, he walked to a gray-clothed, white-haired old man and stood still. A ray of light shot out of the Doran's eyes, and he said in a deep voice, "Listen, when your 9th great-uncle escapes Yuaning, you kill him." When the boy heard this, his body trembled, and he was so scared that he threw the magic sword away. He lay on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly, crying, "Old ancestor, grandson has never disobeyed you." The Daoran snorted and said with some annoyance, "How can I not know whether you have such thoughts or not? If I tell you to do it, just do it. The time is pressing. Hurry up and get up. Do you want to kill us?" The boy stood up in fear and took the magic sword in his hand. Although his arms were trembling, he could still hold it firmly. The gray-clothed Taoist took a look and said in a deep voice, "Third brother, I'll take my leave first." After saying that, he patted the back of his head, and a Yuanying escaped from the top. At that moment, the Daoran shouted, "Su Yihua, what are you waiting for?" The boy was shocked when he heard that. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. He made up his mind and swung the sword. Wherever the sword light passed, a white-haired head rolled to the ground. Chapter 348. Although the head of the Taoist's 6 sons fell, after the Yuanying escaped from his body, he wrapped his primordial spirit and fell into a large drum, disappearing in an instant. This drum was called Qinyang drum. It was the cultivation weapon passed down through the generations of the Qinyang Su family. With the protection of this magic treasure, one could be sent to reincarnate, and it could preserve some of his previous life's memories, so he would not enter the world again and lose his true spirit. The magic sword was stained with blood, and in an instant, it let out a ray of light, as if it was being reflected by candlelight. The Daoran stood up and took a few glances, then turned to a skinny Taoist with drooping eyelids and said, "Seventh brother, it's your turn." The skinny Taoist snorted and said to the boy coldly, "Come here, send me on my way." After saying that, he shook his body, and the Yuanying escaped from his head, and he also jumped into the Qinyang drum. The boy had just killed the Yuanying Jinren, and he thought he was in a dream, but when he was called, he immediately quivered and came back to his senses. He first looked at his ancestor, and when he saw that there was no expression on his face, he calmed himself down. After this, his courage seemed to have grown a lot, and after calming his breathing he walked in front of the skinny Taoist, raised the magic sword up high, and swung it down. The blade of the sword sliced through the neck without any delay, and the Taoist's head rolled down. The magic sword passed through the blood, and originally it was like ordinary iron reflecting light, but now, looking at it from afar, it seemed to be even brighter than just now, giving off a lustrous light like jade. It really is a killing sword, boy. It's my turn. In the southeast corner, a white-robed cultivator stood up. This person had a smile on his face, as if he was very open to life and death, and he didn't forget to tidy up his clothes, then took out a pot of wine and drank 2 mouthfuls, saying, "Boy, do it quickly, then just now you will look happy." The boy came up, and after killing 2 people, he had also adapted a lot, so he came up and wanted to slash. But the white-robed cultivator used his fingers to pinch the blade of the sword. He waved his hand and said, "Wait, let me drink another mouthful of wine." The old Taoist frowned and said, "Fifth brother, what time is it? Why don't you put away your lazy attitude?" The white-robed cultivator laughed heartily and stretched his head forward, revealing his smooth, white neck. He clapped his hands and said, "Charge over here." The boy gripped the hilt of his sword and aimed at that place. With a shout, he raised his sword and chopped down. Pooh! This person's head also fell off. With a flash of blood-red light, a Yuanying jumped out from the severed neck and entered the Qin great drum. At this moment, the Taoist with the hoarse voice waved his sleeves and stood up. This person's hair was tied into 2 buns. His eyebrows were bright, and he had a mustache. His clothes were simple and elegant, and he had the air of an immortal. He raised his head and sighed. If it had been a day or 2 later, why would we have lost our lives in vain? Now, he could only give up his physical body. When he reincarnates in the future, he will look for a fated chance. Daoren also sighed, "Third brother, be careful." The Taoist bowed and then straightened his back, not moving at all. Due to his aura, the boy actually didn't dare to step forward. Daoren looked at him and pushed him. The boy couldn't help but take a few steps forward. When he raised his head, he saw that the Taoist was right in front of him. He didn't think much and used the momentum he had just now to swing the sword with both hands. Blood splattered, and the head was chopped off. After killing 4 nascent soul cultivators in a row, the boy suddenly felt weak and almost collapsed to the ground. Doran's eyes lit up and he shouted, "Quickly throw away the sword." The boy didn't think and immediately let go, throwing the sword away. However, the sword didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it buzzed and flew in the air. It seemed to have a mind of its own. The old Taoist stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword. He stared blankly at the cold blade that was as clear as autumn water. His gaze was complicated and it was hard to tell if he was happy or sad. He mumbled, "It's done." This sword was a killing sword. It was one of perfected Sumo's belongings. It was said that it was taken from a demonic cultivator. There was a strange thing about this sword. The higher the cultivation of the person killed by it, the more powerful it was. That day, Sumo was afraid that he couldn't control this sword, so he forcefully erased the sword's spirit and refined it for his own use. Later, he gave it to Daoren. Now, they used the lives of 4 Yuanying perfected cultivators to nourish the sword. They wanted to borrow the sword's power to cut open the last restriction on the true dragon manner. Then, they would let Daoren charge in and try with all their strength to see if he could use the remains of the Azure Dragon to form a grotto heaven. If he succeeded, he might be able to escape with his life. Daoren held the sword and stood up. He stared at the heavy stone gate in front of him. This restriction had been refined by the 5 of them for more than 20 years. Originally, with a few more years of hard work, they would be able to succeed. Even if it dragged on for a day or 2 and a key restriction was broken, there would be 1 less person who would be sacrificed to the sword. However, they didn't expect that before a day had passed, the formation outside had already been broken. They had no choice but to sacrifice 4 Yuanying perfected cultivators to feed this killing sword. The price they paid was huge. However, it was useless to think about it now. He muttered a few words and bit the tip of his tongue. He spat a mouthful of essence blood onto the tip of the sword. Then he tossed the sword into the air. It turned into a pure white light and viciously slashed down on the restriction. There was a thunderous explosion. The rumbling sound spread far and wide. Even the Chinsong School's mountain gate could hear it clearly. Daoren waved his sleeves and swept away the dust. When he looked again, he saw that the restriction was gone and the gate was wide open. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He put the Qinyang drum into his sleeves and impatiently flew in. Su Yang saw that the gate of the True Dragon Manor was broken and couldn't help but be shocked. He wanted to go in and take a look, but he was worried that the other party would discover him. After thinking for a long time, he finally made up his mind. Just as he was about to stir up the distracting thoughts in the child's heart and entice him to enter the manor, he heard a voice from inside, "Su Iwa, come in." When the child heard the ancestor call his name, he felt a wave of fear in his heart. However, if the ancestor wanted to kill him, he could do so with just a wave of his hand. He couldn't resist. After nervously entering the room, he looked around and saw that it was empty. There were no pillars or beams, only a stone tablet standing alone in the middle of the hall. There were thick chains leading in all directions from the top. When he looked carefully, he realized that he was on a copper plate that was suspended in the air. However, it was pitch black below him, and he couldn't see anything clearly. At this moment, Doran's face was filled with uncertainty as he stared at the stone tablet in a daze. Just now, he had come in. Originally, he had the heart to cut off all means of retreat, but after seeing this item, his determination to rise up receded like the tide. This stone tablet was the key to the True Dragon Manor. There was a large formation on it called the Seven Stars Great Shift Formation. If this formation could be activated, it could move the entire manor to another place. But because of that, the old Taoist hesitated. He slashed open the gate. Previously, he was forced into a corner and wanted to fight to the death to achieve the position of the heavenly grotto heaven. However, putting aside the fact that there was only a sliver of hope, the moment he stepped into the elephant realm, the Black Azure Sect's heavenly abode would rush over to kill him, and he would want to escape. If he wanted to escape, it would be extremely difficult. Originally, he had no way out and had to do this. However, after entering the manor, the stone tablet gave him another choice. He couldn't help but hesitate. However, the reason why he didn't move was because he had no other choice. If he wanted to move such a huge True Dragon Manor, it would consume a lot of spiritual energy. He wasn't 100% confident and might not succeed even if he lost his life. After thinking about it a few times, he felt that there was a higher chance of moving the manor. Since he had made up his mind, he gave up on his previous thoughts. He placed his hand on the stone tablet and poured spiritual energy into it, activating the formation. However, when he activated the teleportation formation just now, he felt all the magic power in his body gushing out like a broken dam. He couldn't help but frown and suddenly said, "Junior brothers, quickly come out and help me." The moment he said that, the four Yuanying jumped out together. They used their strength at the same time and the entire stone tablet shone. However, they didn't have physical bodies, so every bit of magic power they used was a bit less. After a short while, the four nascent souls that were originally shining with golden light became dim. It seemed like they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. After a few more breaths, the four nascent souls were finally exhausted, turning into specks of light and dispersing. Without the protection of the four nascent souls, the four nascent souls returned to his sleeve. At this moment, the stone tablet was still a little short. Daoren knew with one look that unless he was willing to disperse his own Yuanying and pour all his spiritual energy into it, he definitely wouldn't be able to activate the formation. However, if he did that, his cultivation would also completely dissipate. He had already lived for more than 900 years. If he wanted to refine his cultivation back, it would be impossible. He sighed in his heart and said, "Forget it." He turned his head and shouted at the boy, "Su Yihua, remember this. After we leave, you must guard this cave well and wait patiently for us to reincarnate. In the future, when the Su clan is restored, we will remember you as the greatest merit." The boy didn't understand and answered in a daze. Daoren didn't have time to talk to him and shouted, "Qin Yangzhenren, I hope you can take care of this bloodline for my clan." At this moment, a ray of light flashed by and a yellow-clothed youth walked out. He said mockingly, The Su clan's descendants are useless, yet they want this old man to take care of a disciple who hasn't opened his meridians. If this gets out, I won't have the face to see my old friends again. Daoren said, the Su clan is about to be destroyed. Without my Su clan's bloodline to refine, I'm afraid Jinren will never be able to achieve Dao. The youth glanced at him and said, don't use this to threaten me. How can I not understand this logic? If it wasn't for Su Mo not listening to my advice and overestimating his own strength to fight that fierce person, even his spirit couldn't escape. How would your Su clan end up in such a state today? Daoren was silent. The youth looked at him and said unhappily, all right, this old man doesn't have the mood to teach the younger generation a lesson today. He turned around and said to the boy with a smile that wasn't a smile, kid, you got lucky. Let's see how your luck is. He raised his hand and patted the top of the boy's head and put him away. Then, he himself also turned into light and disappeared. Seeing that the path of retreat had been arranged properly, Daoren no longer hesitated and shouted loudly. Yuan Ying escaped out of the top of the door and operated the formation with all his might. In a split second, it was as if the sky and earth were collapsing and the mountains were collapsing. With a loud sound that shook the heavens, the entire surging waves lake was tossed up. The True Dragon Manor that was originally several dozen miles underground shifted in the blink of an eye and went somewhere unknown. At this moment, Zhang Yan was standing on the flag platform and hadn't gone deep into the abode. So he naturally noticed the great commotion below, and he pondered deeply for a moment before he said, fellow Taoist Su, do you know what's going on below? Su Yin said angrily, reporting to Old Master, that Su clan's old ancestor actually broke the door of the True Dragon Manor and activated the teleportation formation within. He has already moved the entire cave to another place. Zhang Yan couldn't help but be a little surprised and asked, do you know where they went? Su Yin thought for a moment and said with a little uncertainty, even if my separated soul went thousands of miles away, I would still be able to sense it. But right now, I can't sense it at all. I'm afraid it's no longer above the Donghua continent. Chapter 349. After the protective formation was broken, more than 1,000 cultivators rushed into the cave residence. Because the 5 nascent soul cultivators were nowhere to be seen, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive, coupled with Su Yihong's defeat and the numerous guests' betrayal, in less than half a day, the entire abode was razed to the ground. Besides the servants and maids, all the cultivators of the Su clan were slaughtered. Then came the news that Su Wenyan had been personally killed by Ning Chongxian. The various caves of the Su clan in the mountain gate had also been cleaned up, and all the disciples had been killed. The spirit island of the continent and Qifengxiu mansion that they had occupied were all taken back by the mountain gate. After the sect master received the decree, the Su clan was removed from the Qinsong school in just over a day. The thousands of years of the sect had disappeared in a day. Qi Yuntian ordered his trusted subordinates to count the gains of this trip. Then he made a record and divided it into 2 books. Then he took the disciples back to the floating heavenly palace. The group returned to the floating heavenly palace. Qi Yuntian ordered the disciples to wait outside the hall while he entered the hall alone and presented the record. After listening to the detailed report, Sect Master Qin first praised him and then ordered him to step aside. Qi Yuntian bowed and stood behind Meng Zhen. Immortal Yen frowned slightly and said, Sect Master, those traitorous disciples have moved the True Dragon Mansion to another place. We must guard against them. Sect Master Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, the immortal graveyard of the True Dragon Mansion has its own fate. There is no need to worry. The Su clan's fate has come to an end. The remaining members are not a threat. All the immortals in the hall knew that the sect master's cultivation was profound. Since he said this, he must have thought about it, so he didn't say anything more. Sun Jinren glanced at Immortal Qin and said loudly, Sect Master, now that the Su clan has been eliminated, Su Wenyan and Su Yihong have been killed, the top 10 disciples can be replaced. Sect Master Qin smiled and said, the day before yesterday, you all said that whoever can take down that Su Yihong will be able to take over his position. Tell me, how did that Su Yihong lose this battle? Hearing the sect leader's question, Chi Yun-tian hurriedly bowed and said, reporting to the sect leader, the one who defeated Su Yihong today is Zhou's disciple, Zhang Yan. The sect leader nodded slightly and praised, good. This is a good disciple. As soon as these words were spoken, Zhang Yan's position as one of the top 10 disciples was already set in stone, and there was no room for dispute. Immortal Peng's beautiful eyes lit up, and a ripple appeared on the corners of her red lips. On the other hand, Taoist Master Qin's expression was somewhat ugly. Although she had repeatedly tried to stop Taoist Master Peng from entering the trap, in the end, she didn't even hesitate to muddy the waters. But even so, she still couldn't suppress Zhang Yan. At this point she was powerless to stop it. Meng Zhen pondered for a moment. However, the seating arrangement of the 10 disciples will have to be reconsidered. He turned his head slightly and said, Sage Peng, what do you think? After Chi Yun-tian lost his position, the ranking of the disciples after him rose. Now Huxian was the first among the 10 disciples. Ning Chongxian and Su Wenyan fought to a draw, but because they didn't decide the winner with Su Yihong, he was ranked 9th, while Su Yihong was ranked 8th. Now that Su Yihong was eliminated by Zhang Yan, according to this ranking, Zhang Yan should be ranked before Ning Chongxian. Taoist Master Peng bowed to Meng Zhen and said, Senior brother Meng, although Zhang Yan's cultivation is not bad, he is still a latecomer. But in the end, he is a latecomer. Since martial nephew Ning entered the list first, in junior sister's humble opinion, it is appropriate for him to be ranked before Zhang Yan. Putting Ning Chongxian in front was to take care of Sun Jinren's face and to convey goodwill. Sun Jinren was also well aware of this and immediately accepted the kindness. However, as Taoist Master Dong Tian, he naturally wouldn't take advantage of Zhang Yan. He smiled and said, Zhang Yan is indeed a good disciple. It's not in vain that I thought highly of him that day. Take it as a reward. He was a man of action. With a tap of his hand, a ray of light flew out of the hall. Zhang Yan was sitting outside the hall when he saw a ray of light heading straight for him. He stretched out his hand to catch it. He opened his palm and saw a smooth and flawless jade plate. His heart moved and he used his inspiration to explore it. He found that it was the second half of the Lan Yun's secret manual. He stood up and bowed. He was slightly happy and said loudly, Thank you, Taoist Master, for the technique. From his point of view, there was no need to fight for the position of the top 10 disciples. Although it was related to the amount of external objects in cultivation, as long as one entered this position, even if he was ranked last, the benefits he would receive would be far beyond that of an ordinary disciple. He himself had the heavenly lake of Zhaoyu in hand, and he also had the support of Zhou Chongju, Taoist Master Peng and the others. He didn't need to care about these losses. Instead, he obtained the second half of the secret manual, which was a real benefit. If he studied it seriously, he would be able to add a lot of techniques. Sect leader Qin took the law ranking and crossed off Su Yihong's name, replacing it with Zhang Yan's name. After stamping it with his seal, he said, From today onwards, these 10 people are the top 10 disciples of our sect. Yunhyun, go and hang this list in the merit courtyard to announce to the sect. Chi Yun-tian responded and stood up. He went forward to take the law ranking, bowed again and left the hall. The disciples outside the hall heard the words of the sect leader and the Taoist masters clearly. They couldn't help but look at Zhang Yan. Suddenly, 2 disciples who were closer to Zhang Yan stood up and bowed to him respectfully. Greetings, Senior Brother Zhang. When they stood up, dozens of disciples nearby also woke up and bowed to him. In the end, hundreds of disciples stood up and said loudly, Greetings, Senior Brother Zhang. His voice rumbled, shaking the outer hall and spreading far into the distance. Fang Hong and the others looked on from the side. They were envious and jealous. They hated that they were the ones who received the greetings from the disciples. Zhang Yan also stood up and returned the greetings with a smile. He was also deeply moved. After 3 years of hard work, he finally succeeded. From now on, his position in the Qinsong school was incomparable to that of the ordinary Yuanying Zhenren. It was perfectly justifiable for him to monopolize a mansion. If he could sit on this position for 360 years, he could enter the Hall of Duzhen and become an upper elder. Other than that, He could also choose a few good earth spirits from the spiritual mechanism courtyard to plant in his cave. He could also read the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures in the sutra courtyard. He could also choose one of the 12 supernatural powers to cultivate. The benefits were endless. Hearing the noise outside, Taoist Master Qin's expression became even worse. He said angrily, "Senior brother, the floating heavenly palace is an important place. How can you allow the disciples to make a ruckus?" Sect leader Qin smiled faintly but did not feel offended. He said, "Junior sister is too harsh." He then ignored her and turned to the servant boy beside him. "Go and summon Miao Kuan to the palace." The servant hurriedly accepted the order. After a while, the fat Taoist with a funny face came to the hall again. Sect leader Qin looked at him several times and said warmly, "Come a little closer." Miao Kuan hurriedly took a few steps forward. Sect leader Qin said, "Miao Kuan, you followed my orders and hid in the Su clan for more than 20 years. You have worked hard and contributed greatly. Now that the Su clan has been eliminated, I will give you a place to start." At this point, he paused for a moment, then slowly said, "Today, I will accept you as a registered disciple. After you return to the sect, you will have no other cave abode. The Xinjin stream that Su Yihong used to live in will be given to you." Hearing this, Miao Kuan was overjoyed. He hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. He said, "Disciple will cultivate diligently and not let sect leader master down." The few spiritual masters looked at each other and shook their heads. Originally, they also wanted to get their hands on the Xinjin stream. They were just looking for a chance to speak up. However, sect leader Qin had accepted this person as a disciple and shut their mouths. No one could say anything about him taking over the Xinjin stream as a disciple of the sect leader. Sect leader Qin took the book that Qi Yuntian had presented just now and ordered the servant to pass it to the spiritual masters. The Su family's thousands of years of accumulation was no small matter. The cultivation items were innumerable. After the spiritual masters looked through it, they thought about it carefully. They knew that what was written in this book was definitely not the whole book, but only a small portion. Qi Yuntian definitely had another book in his hands. However, at the moment, the master and disciple line was in power, so they could only pretend that they did not know. After the spiritual masters looked through it, sect leader Qin passed down a decree to reward the disciples according to their contributions in this battle. Zhang Yan was now one of the top 10 disciples. He had also made a great contribution on this trip, so he also received a lot. In total, he received tens of thousands of medicinal pills, more than 30 magical treasures and instruments, 7 cave abodes and spiritual islands. Among them, there was 1 blessed land, 2 true palaces, 3 Qi residences, and a continent with hundreds of years of earth aura. Other than the disciples on this trip, the various houses also had their own gains. Even the aristocratic families received some benefits. However, compared to the master and disciple line, it paled in comparison. After the distribution was completed, a bell rang and a servant walked out of the hall, saying, "Sect leader spiritual master has decreed that today's matters are over. There is no need for the disciples to wait, you may leave on your own." Zhang Yan got up and flew into the air. He wanted to say goodbye to Qi Yuntian, Ning Chongxian and the others before leaving. Suddenly, he heard someone say from behind, "Senior brother Zhang, please wait." He turned around and saw Fang Hong chasing after him on a cloud. He said in surprise, "So it's junior brother Fang. Why am I here?" Fang Hong came up and greeted him. He said awkwardly, "Senior brother Zhang, I am looking for you because of the Ji Luo golden awl." Zhang Yan was surprised. "Senior brother, why do you say that? I have never seen this treasure." Seeing that Zhang Yan was deliberately making things difficult for him, Fang Hong cursed in his heart. He said angrily, "Just now, I used this treasure to injure Su Yihong. It was just that I was in a hurry to leave and it fell into this person's hands. This treasure was given to me by my master. I dare not throw it away. Now that this person thinks that senior brother has captured it, I hope that senior brother will return this treasure for the sake of us being in the same sect. I will be very grateful." Zhang Yan frowned. "Junior brother Fang, you are too careless. This treasure was given to you by our master. How can you lose it so easily? Feng Hong was taught a lesson for no reason. Even though he felt wronged, he could not do anything about it. Zhang Yan was now one of the top 10 disciples. Other than the sect leader and a few Dong Tianjinren, there was no need to pay special attention to anyone else. He could only respectfully call him Senior Brother Zhang. In order to get back this treasure, he had to compromise. He said in a low voice, "Senior Brother is right. I have been careless. I hope Senior Brother can help me." Zhang Yan said lightly, "I have never seen this treasure. If it is really with Su Yihong, it must be in the sleeve. When I go back, I will refine the sleeve. If I see this treasure, I will return it to you." Feng Hong was helpless. He could only say, Then I hope Senior Brother will be careful. I will definitely repay you." Chapter 350. As soon as the Merit Court's law ranking came out, the names of the top 10 disciples were listed. Among them, Zhang Yan's name was the most eye-catching. In the past thousands of years, he was the only cultivator who was not a disciple of Dong Tianjinren but was able to enter this ranking. Zhang Yan's appearance couldn't help but cause the thoughts of the junior disciples in the sect to run wild, and they faintly saw a trace of possibility. If they cultivated diligently and bitterly, then would they be able to enter the rankings one day like Senior Brother Zhang? Even among the aristocratic families, some of the disciples seemed to have seen a bright path. Zhang Yan's identity not only did not cause people to look down on him, but instead caused people to feel deep veneration. This news spread outside the mountain gate in a few days, and even the other large sects heard about it. In the Yaoview building of the Beichen sect, a handsome young man was moving his Dan Sha and training his qi. This was the head of the Beichen sect, Jiang Lin. After an hour, he slowly stopped and walked out of the hall. At this moment, he suddenly heard a boy outside the door reporting, "Zhenren sect leader, Elder Yen wants to see you. He has been waiting outside for a long time." Sect leader Jiang was startled and said hurriedly, "Quickly invite him in." "No, I'll go greet him personally." The only Yuanying Zhenren in the sect was here, so he didn't dare to be arrogant. He tidied his clothes and came out to greet him, smiling. "So it's Martial Uncle Yen." He took a closer look and said in surprise, "Martial Uncle, you look so happy today. Could it be that you have something good to tell me?" Jiang Lin was a humorous person and didn't usually put on airs as the head of the sect. The Beichen sect didn't pay attention to etiquette and rules like the other major sects, so he was very casual when he talked and laughed. Elder Yen bowed with a smile. After the two of them sat down, he stroked his beard and said, "I was about to report to the head of the sect. Does the head of the sect remember the Qinsong school disciple Zhang Yan who came that day?" Jiang Lin's expression changed slightly and he said with a smile, "How can I not remember? It's just that when he came the last time, I was busy and wasn't in the mountain gate, so I missed him. It's a pity that the elder mentioned a joyous occasion. Is it related to him?" Although he said it politely, he actually didn't think much of it. Although Qinsong school was a big sect, an ordinary inherited disciple, who was not even a direct disciple of the heaven's abode, was not worthy of his attention. No matter what, he was still a sect leader. On that day, Elder Yen, the Yuanying spiritual master, had already given him a lot of face. Why would he need to personally welcome them? With a smile on his face, Elder Yen replying to sect leader, "This old man just now received news that Zhang Yan is now one of the top 10 inner disciples of Qinsong school." At first, Jiang Lin did not pay too much attention to it. He was about to take the tea and drink it, but after hearing it, he could not help but be moved. He suddenly stood up and said, "Is this true?" Elder Yen also stood up and said, "There is no mistake." Jiang Lin slowly put down the teacup and paced back and forth in the room with his hands clasped behind his back. There was a contemplative look on his face. What did it mean to be one of the top 10 inner disciples of Qinsong school? He also knew that as long as he could sit firmly in this position, he would definitely become an elder in the Hall of Crossing Truth in the future. His status would be respected and his words would have a lot of weight. If he was slightly biased towards Beichen faction, the benefits would naturally be great. It was just that he did not know Zhang Yan well after all. Everything he knew came from Elder Yen, so he could not help but be a little hesitant. After all, Zhang Yan was not a disciple of the Heaven's Abode spiritual master. His foundation was not solid. What if after Baichen faction paid a lot, he was pushed down from his seat? That was just a small matter. If he got involved, he would be implicated. If he angered one of the forces in Qinsong school, Baichen faction was just a small sect after all. They could not afford to be angry. As a sect leader, he had to think twice for his disciples. Elder Yan also knew the sect leader's concerns. Because he did not interrupt Jiang Lin's thoughts, he just sat quietly at the side. After about 10 minutes, Jiang Lin turned around and cupped his hands. He said apologetically, "Elder Yan, sorry for the wait." Elder Yan said seriously, "What are you talking about, sect leader? This matter is of great importance. You should think carefully." Jiang Lin returned to his seat with a determined look on his face. He said in a low voice, "I have decided to send someone to congratulate them. Elder Yan, what do you think we should send?" After some careful consideration, he felt that it was a good bet. This did not mean that he had full confidence in Zhang Yan, but he believed in Elder Yan's judgment. Elder Yan had always been far-sighted. He did things boldly but cautiously. He was far beyond Jiang Lin's reach. If he did not have to focus on cultivation, the position of sect leader would have been taken by Elder Yan. Elder Yan was familiar with Jiang Lin's temperament. When he came here, he had some confidence. Now that the sect leader had agreed, although it was not unexpected, he was happy. He thought about it and said, "I have already interacted with Zhang Yan a few times, so it will not be too abrupt. However, now that he is one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong school, the gift cannot be too shabby. We need to give him something strong. In my opinion, why not give him some of that pot of Peng Lai Chi?" Jiang Lin could not help but be shocked. Elder Yan, this was left behind by the founder. Even among the 10 sects of Xian men, it may not be possible to have it. Do you really want to give it to him? Jiang Lin could not help but be shocked. Elder Yan, this item was left behind by the founder of the North Star sect. Even the 10 sects of Xian men don't have it. Do you really want to give it to him? If one took a breath when breaking through to the next realm, one would be able to comprehend its mysteries and have a higher chance of success. It could be said that Elder Yan was able to break through the Yuanying realm thanks to this item. However, this item was limited and extremely precious. Within 100 years, it could only be used by the elders and the sect leader. The other disciples had never even heard of it. Elder Yan Daoren said, "I have already made it clear to my Daon. The breath of Peng Lai Chi that was left for him will be given to fellow Zhang." Jiang Lin stared at Elder Yan for a while and said seriously, "Elder Yan is right. Without this item, this person cannot be moved." He stood up and pressed down on Elder Yan, who was about to get up. He said, "Elder Yan, please wait for a moment. I will be right back." He turned into the inner room and came out after a while. He carefully placed a golden pot on the table and said, "Along with my 3 breaths of Peng Lai Chi and my brother's breath, I will give it to Elder Yan as well." Elder Yan was moved. "Sect leader, you are about to break through. If you lose 3 breaths of immortal Qi, won't you lose a lot of chances?" Jiang Lin laughed. "Since Elder Yan is willing to give it to me, as the sect leader, what can I not do? I have seen everything that you have done for the sect Zen. Even though I am of little ability and virtue, but as a disciple of a sect, we should advance and retreat together." Elder Yan sighed. "Sect leader is magnanimous. Why worry that our sect will not prosper?" Jiang Lin had put in a lot of effort this time. Apart from the breath of Peng Lai Chi that Elder Yan had already used, he took out the remaining 5 breaths of immortal Qi. If he wanted to obtain more, he would have to wait for another 30 years to the next 100 years. It was equivalent to delaying the day that he was confident of breaking through by many days. But from Elder Yan's point of view, it was worth it. Once a disciple of the Qinsong school became one of the top 10 disciples, there would definitely be countless people who would come to join them. Moreover, Zhang Yan had the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake in his hands. He also had the support of the Dong Tianjinren. In less than 100 years, he would be able to form a huge force with him as the leader. No one could underestimate him. He stood up and said, "I will go prepare now. I will head to the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake in a few days." Huanjin Temple. in the Chiwu Mountain. After Zhao Hozhou and Shi Yutang received the news, they were also very surprised. Zhao Hozhou said solemnly, "I heard that Taoist Zhang became one of the top 10 disciples. It is reasonable for us to go congratulate him." Shi Yutang's eyes lit up. She agreed, "Senior martial brother is right." That day, Taoist Zhang helped us to make the life-protecting banner, allowing us to enter the celestial abode and obtain the secret technique. However, when we went back to visit Taoist Zhang, he happened to be in seclusion, so we didn't get to see him. It is very regretful. These few years, our cultivation has improved greatly, and it is all thanks to Taoist Zhang. How can we not go to such a joyous event? Shaoqing Sect, Sprint Thunder Hall. Cho Kuan looked at the flying sword in his hand and felt very emotional. He thought to himself, "That day, I parted with Taoist Zhang at the Flying Boat Celestial Market. It has been more than 20 years since then. Back then, he was still at the Mystic Light realm. Now, I have already stepped into the core transformation realm. I thought that when we met again, I would definitely be able to win. I didn't expect that he has already become one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school. He is one step ahead of me." He thought for a long time and shouted, "Come in." A servant walked in and knelt on the ground. He said, "This lowly one is here. Master, if there is anything, please tell me." Cho Kuan instructed, "Prepare a generous gift for me. Remember not to be stingy. I will personally pay a visit to the Qinsong school in the near future." Ancient Dingyang County, present-day southern Liang Country's Qi Prefecture. Zhou Zishang's expression was gloomy. He shook the letter in his hand and said to a young cultivator, "Junior brother, is this rumor true?" The young cultivator said respectfully, "Senior brother, junior brother doesn't dare to lie." Zhou Zishang shook the letter, and it instantly shattered into countless pieces. He said hatefully, "That day, I made a mistake, but I didn't want him to turn things around. Today, he is already too powerful to be controlled." Back then, he gave Zhang Yan a mystic origin internal meditation record to destroy his foundation. He even boasted in front of his servants that he would leave the mountain obediently. However, the news he received was that Zhang Yan became famous at the Eroding Word Conference and became a lower house disciple of the Qinsong school. This caused him to lose a lot of face, and he had to return to the sect. He was even scolded by the elders of his family for this. Right now, he was only at the second level of the Mystic Light realm, but this Zhang Yan had already formed a Grade 1 core and became one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school. Whether it was in terms of cultivation or status, he was far above him. While he was shocked, he also felt a trace of fear and annoyance. The young cultivator looked at his expression and said carefully, "Senior brother, do you want to tell senior sister?" Zhou Zishang furrowed his eyebrows and waved his hand. "No need. She is cultivating in the South Sea right now, and it would be bad to tell her. It's fine as long as I know. None of you need to say anything, or else don't blame me for being merciless." The young cultivator then said in a low voice, "I'm just afraid that someone will talk too much." Zhou Zishang harumphed and said, "If Big Sis doesn't succeed in her cultivation, she won't return. From what I can see, we probably won't be able to see her for the next few decades. If you don't say anything, who else will know?" The Jade Sky sect was a large, profound sect that wasn't inferior to the Dark Azure sect. Moreover, one was in the south while the other was in the north. Normally, they would have very little interaction with each other. Even though this piece of news was currently attracting the attention of others, but after a period of time, it would gradually be forgotten and no one would mention it again. Chapter 351. After staying outside for 2 days, Zhang Yan returned to Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. As soon as he entered the mansion, he saw Lu Yenyi, Tian Kuan, the Wang sisters, and a group of people from Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake to congratulate him. His teacher had become one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong school. Now, his disciples could call themselves the disciples of Zhaoyu. It seemed that the Wang sisters were only happy for Zhang Yan's promotion in the sect, but Lu Yenyi was secretly impressed. She knew how difficult it was for her teacher to climb to this position. She didn't know how much hard work he had gone through and how many schemes he had used just now to achieve what he had today. Luo Xiao walked up with a smile and handed over a list of gifts. She said, "Master, just now you returned to the mansion and there are already many people coming to send gifts. These top 10 disciples are really good. I am also envious of them." Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled. He took the list of gifts and glanced at the name list. He saw the names of Xie Zongyuan, Feng Ming, Qi Nan, and the others. There was also the 100 ships of true sand sent by Zhenren Peng. In addition, there were many name cards from disciples who wanted to meet him. How could he not know that these disciples wanted to come to him? Although he wanted to expand the number of disciples in the future, it was not a good time now. He was still thinking about how to break through the shell. Therefore, he ordered Shang Chong to reject all of them. After that, Zhang Yan dismissed all the disciples, leaving only Luo Xiao behind. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Luo, you've been with me for a long time. I've been thinking about finding a good cultivation method for fellow Taoist Luo to cultivate, but I've been delayed by many things, so I couldn't do it. Now that I'm one of the top 10 disciples, I can browse through the thousands of Tao books in Sift Courtyard, so it shouldn't be difficult for me to find a cultivation method for fellow Taoist unification." When Luo Xiao heard this, she hurriedly bowed and said joyfully, "Master is considerate, this servant will thank you first." After Zhang Yan talked with Luo Xiao for a while, he returned to the 12 palaces. The mirror spirit had been waiting for a long time. When she saw him, she bowed and said, "Congratulations, Master." "Congratulations, Master." Zhang Yan laughed and said, "You don't have to do the same." The mirror spirit was very smooth, but she was not embarrassed at all. Instead, she smiled apologetically. Who wouldn't like to listen to flattery? This was especially true for a magical treasure like him. He didn't have to worry about betraying his master, so he was even more fearless. After Zhang Yan sat down, he took a step forward. "Master, Xiao Yi has already seized that Xiao Ku's body. I wonder if Master wishes to see him?" Zhang Yan, on the other hand, was slightly astonished. He also knew how difficult possession was. That day, he had not managed to subdue Xiao Chu's primordial spirit, yet this Xiao Yi was actually able to succeed in possession. He was indeed extraordinary. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Very well, I can call him over to see me." Mirror Spirit got the order. He activated the formation and sent Xiao Yi in. Xiao Yi landed on the ground. He didn't look left or right. After seeing Zhang Yan, he immediately went forward and kowtowed, saying, "Benefactor, please accept this lowly one's bow." He respectfully kowtowed. Zhang Yan sat on the jade couch and accepted his bow, saying, "Stand up and talk." Xiao Yi said, "Yes." He didn't hesitate to stand up. Zhang Yan saw that his face was slightly pale. That was because his vitality had been greatly damaged after the possession. It was also because his body was weak. If he didn't recuperate when he went back and damaged his Tao foundation, then all this effort would have been in vain. However, since this person could do this, he didn't mind giving him another push. He didn't mind giving her another push and said, "That day at the grand competition, senior brother Xiao Sha wanted to take you back, and I agreed. However, with your current condition, I'm afraid your reputation won't be very good. Why don't you stay in my mansion for a few days to recuperate? It won't be too late to return after you've recovered." Xiao Yi revealed a look of gratitude and knelt down again, saying, "This lowly one will remember benefactor's gift. In the future, if you have any orders, even if I have to die, I won't dare to refuse." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and glanced at the mirror spirit. The latter understood and turned the formation door, sending him out. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he instructed the mirror spirit, "Don't be stingy with the elixir. I have underestimated him before. Not only is this person persevering, but he is also flexible. It's not something an ordinary person can do. He will be of great use in the future." The mirror spirit immediately understood and bowed, saying, "Master, don't worry. This lowly one will take good care of him." Zhang Yan made an "oh" sound and took out a piece of beautiful jade from his sleeve, saying, "Fellow Su, have you seen that person just now?" Su Yang came out from the beautiful jade and showed his figure. He said with envy, "Master, this lowly one saw clearly. This person must have succeeded in taking over the body." he patted his chest again and said confidently, "This lowly one is different from him. If Master gives this lowly one a physical body, I have a 90% chance of winning." Zhang Yan knew that he wasn't lying. Su Yang had the body of a true demon now and didn't need to rely on his physical body to cultivate. Taking over a body was easy for him. However, he shook his head and smiled. "Although your big brother's body is in my hands, your cultivation isn't high enough. If you take it now, most of this body will be destroyed. The gains won't make up for the losses." Su Yang sighed and said, "Sigh, Master is right." Su Yihong was born from the same mother, so the body was the most compatible with him. It was many times closer than the other Su family members. As long as he could take over the body, if he was lucky, he would be able to inherit most of the inheritance. However, his cultivation was indeed not high enough. According to his current cultivation, he was only a mystic light realm cultivator. He still needed to improve a bit before he could completely take over this body. Otherwise, it would be a waste of his cultivation. Zhang Yan tapped the beautiful jade with his finger and said, "I want to let you go out and cultivate for a few more years. Are you willing?" Su Yang was also very smart and asked carefully, "What does Master want this lowly one to do?" Zhang Yan raised his head, and his gaze seemed to look into the distance. After a while, he slowly said, "You have the body of a demon, so don't wander around the territories of the 10 sections. Go to the territory of the demon sect. If possible, go and find a master to seek the Tao and gather information. If the demon sect has any movements, tell me through a split soul." The Donghua continent's 1,000-year demon tribulation was about to begin. Although he had come into contact with the people of the demon sect before, the Six Paths demon sect had been dormant for a long time, so he didn't know how strong they were. Since he was one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school, he would have to face the people of the demon sect sooner or later. At that time, if he still knew nothing about the demon sect, this was not something he wanted to see. Thus, he decided to plan ahead and secretly put a chess piece in. He wanted to know himself and the enemy so that he could deal with them in the future. Su Yang quickly calculated in his heart, and with a quick thought, he felt that going to the devil sect's territory was the best choice. He had cultivated the source-seeking scripture for more than 20 years. Now that he had the body of a true demon, he only needed to carefully find a physical body and go and find a master. Thus, he quickly said, "How can this lowly one not follow Master's orders? I'm willing to go, I'm willing to go." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Okay, I'll give you a treasure. When you use it, not only can it fly out to attack the enemy, but it can also fly and block the light of the sun and moon." He took out an item and pointed at it. A treasure light flew into Su Yihong's body and disappeared. This was one of the spiritual weapons left by Gui Zongyao. It was called Sincerity Flying Illusion Shuttle. This item was strange and invisible, and it was refined by a ray of light. With the help of this item, Su Yang could fly around without any worries even in the daytime. Su Yang used it a little and felt that this item could change as he wished. He couldn't help but be overjoyed and bowed, "Thank you for the treasure, Master." When the two were talking, the mirror spirit had been silent like a statue. At this moment, her expression suddenly changed, and she said, "Master, there is a female cultivator visiting outside. She claims to be from Qi Yuntian's sect, Qi Mingjiao. She is ordered to come and pay a visit." Zhang Yan pondered in his heart. Qi Mingjiao must have come under Qi Yuntian's order to go out and pay a visit. Thus, he said, "Order Yenny to accompany her first, I'll go see her later." Zhang Yan gave a few more instructions. After making arrangements for Su Yang, he crossed the formation door and entered the main hall. Lu Yinyi and Qi Mingjiao were chatting happily. When they saw Zhang Yan coming out, the two girls quickly got up to greet him. Qi Mingjiao went forward and bowed and said, "Martial nephew Qi Mingjiao greets martial uncle Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. "Martial nephew Qi doesn't need to stand on ceremony, sit." After Qi Mingjiao got up, she went to sit on the seat. Although she had seen Zhang Yan before, she couldn't help but look at him a few more times. That day, she wasn't optimistic about Zhang Yan, but the result was beyond her expectations. After the surprise, she felt a heartfelt admiration. That day in the Merit courtyard, the two of them didn't have a deep conversation. At this moment, Zhang Yan exchanged a few words with her. He found that this girl's thoughts were clear and her words were clear. He thought to himself, no wonder Qi Shixiang put this girl in charge of the Merit courtyard's affairs. She's really making the best use of her talent. After a long time, Qi Mingjiao just now came to the main topic. Today, martial nephew is under my master's order. There are 3 matters. Zhang Yan's expression turned serious. Martial nephew, please speak. Qi Mingjiao took out a jade box and passed it over. She smiled lightly and said, the first matter is that my master ordered me to lend this treasure to martial uncle for 24 years. This item has an extraordinary effect. It can help martial uncle break through the door earlier. That day, martial uncle Ning also relied on this item. Just now, he has successfully stepped through the door. Zhang Yan was never one to refuse a gift. He didn't look at it too much and accepted it graciously. He said, then what about the second matter? Qi Mingjiao saw that after receiving the treasure, he still had a calm and unrestrained look. There wasn't the slightest bit of surprise on his face. She couldn't help but praise him in her heart. She cleared her throat and said, the second matter is that I have to inform martial uncle. Just last night, Huixian achieved yuaning. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. Countless thoughts went through his mind. Just now, not long after Qi Yuntian stepped down, Huixian achieved yuaning. It was clearly a plot by the aristocratic families to target the master and disciple. This was interesting. No wonder Qi Yuntian lent the treasure to him. Firstly, he wanted to build a good relationship with him. Secondly, he wanted to improve his strength as much as possible to reverse the disadvantage. In fact, this was not the main reason. On the contrary, when he fought to a draw with Duda and Xiaosha, Qi Yuntian felt that his potential was endless. If he could break through the door before the next competition, his strength would improve greatly. He might even be able to enter the top ranks. With this in mind, he took out the treasure and lent it to him. Qi Mingjiao said, there is one last matter, which is the most important. All the top 10 disciples should have a position in the sect. Martial Uncle Zhang is no exception. Now, Master has arranged it for Martial Uncle. Zhang Yan asked curiously, oh, what is my position? Qinsong School had 9 courtyards. They were the Merit Courtyard, Zhengqing Courtyard, Shangming Courtyard, Danding Courtyard, Jingluo Courtyard, Baoyang Courtyard, Lingji Courtyard, Fangchen Courtyard, and Ziguang Courtyard. Among them, the Merit Courtyard, Zhengqing Courtyard, and Shangming Courtyard were controlled by master and disciple. As for the Danding Courtyard, Zhou Chongju's daily actions were still impartial. Jingluo Courtyard and Ziguang Courtyard were under the control of the elders of the Duzhen Hall. No one could interfere. As for the Baoyang Courtyard, the Lingji Courtyard, and the Fangchen Courtyard, they were in the hands of the aristocratic families. Zhang Yan guessed that the place he was most likely going to was the Danding Courtyard. Qi Mingjiao pursed her lips and smiled. She took out a decree and handed it to Zhang Yan. She said, Martial Uncle, please take a look. Zhang Yan took the decree and opened it to take a look. However, the result was unexpected. His official position was not one of the 9 courtyards. Instead, he had another place to go. He asked doubtfully, lower courtyard? Qi Mingjiao's beautiful eyes looked deeply at him. She said, from today onwards, Martial Uncle Zhang is the master of the 3 views of the lower courtyard of Qinsong School and the pavilion master of the Leaping Heavens Pavilion. From now on, whoever becomes a true disciple or enters the upper courtyard must be stamped by Martial Uncle Zhang. Otherwise, no one will be accepted. Chapter 352. With his hands behind his back, Zhang Yan stood at the top of the rippling cloud peak and looked at the beautiful scenery of Kangwu Mountain's 18 peaks. In the past, he had defeated the Guangyuan sect's disciples at this peak and obtained the identity of a true disciple, which allowed him to enter the upper house. Only now could he have his future achievements. In the blink of an eye, 26 years had passed. Today, he had returned. Greetings, Chancellor Zhang. 3 white-haired Doran's disciples came to his back and bowed deeply. Zhang Yan slowly turned around and looked at the three of them. As he looked at them, the three of them could not help but lower their heads. He waved his hand and said, "You may dispense with the formalities." Only then did the three old Taoists dare to stand up straight. Now that Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School, he had a high status in the school. Now that he was the lower house's Three Views Master and the Leaping Sky Pavilion Master, he could decide their life and death with a single word. Because of this, they were extremely humble and did not dare to be disrespectful. Among the three Dorans, Zhang Yan recognized two of them. One was the Calm Peace Temple's Zhen Shouzhong, the other was the Virtue Temple's He Shoushuan, and the last one was a white-haired Daoran who looked about 50 years old. Zhang Yan did not know this person, so he could not help but ask, "May I know where Keeper Shi is now?" The old Taoist hurriedly came out and cupped his hands, replying, "Reporting to the headmaster, Senior Brother Shi is getting on in years. 12 years ago, he resigned from his position and returned to his hometown. I heard that he passed away a few years ago, and now I am in charge of the Good Abyss Monastery." He sighed endlessly as he spoke. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said politely, "How should I address you, Keeper?" The Taoist hurriedly said, "I don't deserve to be called Chancellor. I am Ma Shouxiang." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "I will give you an hour to gather all the disciples of the lower house in front of the High Swamp Temple. No mistakes are allowed." Ma Shouxiang was in a bit of a dilemma. The disciples of the lower house were all from the aristocratic families and usually did not listen to their orders. If they wanted to summon them, there might not be many who would come. However, he was well aware of Zhang Yan's identity and how powerful he was. He didn't dare to disobey and immediately said, "Yes. I'll do it right away." The three of them hurriedly turned around and left. Not long after, a loud bell rang from the 18 peaks of the Azure Parasol Mountain. Although Zhang Yan had been appointed as the lower house's chancellor, the aristocratic families had not received any news before he came here. Perhaps others might not have noticed this detail, but what kind of person was Zhang Yan? With just a moment's consideration, he could tell that there was a big deal behind this. Therefore, he made a prompt decision and chose 12 strong men from the cave and rushed here without stopping. The Azure Wu Mountain's middle and lower house disciples were doing their homework when they suddenly heard the bell. They were surprised and did not rush over. Instead, he sent his servants to gather information. After receiving the report, they just now knew that there was a new temple master in the upper house, which was why the disciples were gathered. When they heard that the upper house had sent a chancellor over, they felt that it was a little unusual. However, they did not pay too much attention to it and slowly walked up the cloud-rippling peak. Only the cautious disciples had arrived early just now. Zhang Yan sat on the stone platform at the peak. The three chancellors sat below him, and there were 12 strong men who were over 3 meters tall on his left and right. These disciples did not have the qualifications to observe the sex competition. Naturally, they did not recognize Zhang Yan. However, after looking at him, they felt that something was wrong. His aura was grand and imposing, and it actually gave them an extremely heavy pressure. For a moment, their hearts trembled and they stood below him obediently. The lower house had never had a cultivator with such a high cultivation. Even the three chancellors were only at the first level of clear qi. All the disciples were secretly shocked and thought, "What cultivation is this person? Could he be a mystic light realm cultivator?" However, they did not expect that the master and disciple faction would actually send one of the top 10 disciples, Zhang Yan, here. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "Ma Shouxiang." Ma Shouxiang immediately stood up and said, "Yes, Chancellor. What orders do you have? How many people have arrived?" Ma Shouxiang's expression was solemn. He opened the name list and checked it. He bowed and said, "Chancellor, there were a total of 36 disciples from the 3 courtyards. Only 27 people have arrived." Zhang Yan's expression did not change. Ma Shouxiang carefully looked at his expression and said, "Chancellor, should I send someone to hurry?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "No need. Wait for another hour." Ma Shouxiang nodded and retreated to the side. When those disciples saw that Zhang Yan's cultivation was deep, they originally thought that he would reprimand those who had yet to arrive, so they were slightly nervous. However, seeing that he did not seem to be angry and did not seem to dare to do anything to them, they relaxed and couldn't help but whisper among themselves. Some disciples even grumbled, "I already said that there was no need to come so early. We wasted 2 hours for nothing. If we have the time, we might as well go admire the moon and flowers." The disciple who was scolded by him was also helpless and said, "Junior apprentice brother, it is better to be safe than sorry. Just bear with it. It seems that the new chancellor's cultivation is also very high. He is not a simple person." Another disciple said in disdain, "Him? Do you think a mere chancellor dares to touch the disciples of the 12 great families? Senior apprentice brother Xie, you are too careful." Zhang Yan didn't pay any attention to their conversation. Another 2 hours passed, and the remaining 9 disciples still had not arrived. Ma Shouxiang came up and said, "Chancellor, the time has come." Zhang Yan's expression suddenly became solemn and he said coldly, "As the chancellor, I have summoned all the disciples of the lower house, but they actually did not come. Where are the rules of the sect? Ma Shouxiang, strike off the names of these 9 people and expel them from the lower house. Those who dare to enter the lower house without my orders will be executed." Hearing this, Ma Shouxiang immediately became spirited and said, "Yes, I will obey the chancellor's orders." He rolled up his sleeves and picked up a brush. With a few strokes, he struck off the names of these 9 people from the list. The 20 or so disciples below were thrown into an uproar, their faces filled with shock. Seeing that Zhang Yan was serious, some of the people who were on good terms with the 9 disciples panicked. They signaled to the servants in the distance with their eyes, and those servants understood and hurried out to report the situation. Zhang Yan saw it clearly. He did not say anything to stop them. Instead, he smiled coldly and looked around before saying loudly, 100 years ago, the lower house would only take in 3 direct disciples every 8 years. Even in 80 years, there would only be 30. But now, in the past 100 years, the number of direct disciples has increased by 10 times, resulting in a mix of good and bad, making it difficult to distinguish between the good and the bad. Since I am here, I will eliminate the weak and retain the strong. You all must remember this." Just as he finished speaking, he heard someone in the air say, "The new monastery head is really bold." All the disciples looked up to see 9 disciples coming over on a flying boat. The person at the front wore a high hat and a wide belt. He had the spirit of a disciple from a large clan. The flying boat stopped on the mountain peak and the disciple at the front got off and walked over. When he walked over, the disciples on the left and right all moved aside, greeting him, "Senior apprentice brother Han." This person stood in front of Zhang Yan and seriously looked at Zhang Yan. At first, he was on guard, but then he seemed to think of something and relaxed. He cupped his hands and said, "Chancellor, we are here. I'm not begging you to take back your order. I'm just here to tell you that if you expel us from the lower house today, we can return tomorrow. However, at that time, you might not be able to keep your position as monastery head." He was a disciple of the Han clan. When he heard that the new chancellor had summoned him, he did not take it seriously at all. He had never thought that the new chancellor would openly expel him from the lower house. However, he had the support of the Han clan, so he was not afraid. At worst, he could just ask the elders of the clan to come forward. But if he left with his tail between his legs and did not respond, he would return to the lower house in the future. How would he have the face to stay here? That was why he had come over to say such a thing. After saying this, he turned to leave. Zhang Yan's gaze swept over him and he coldly said, "You do not bow to your master, speak arrogant words, have no respect for your elders, and have openly broken the rules. Arrest and behead them." Senior apprentice brother Han was clearly a bit shocked. He had originally thought that the other was just trying to scare him, but then he saw that the 2 Whaley warriors had come up and were really going to make a move. He was shocked and angry at the same time and loudly shouted, "You dare!" The 2 warriors expressionlessly picked him up and pressed him to the ground. Just now, he felt fear and loudly shouted, "You dare to kill me, I am Han." Before he could finish, the blade in the warrior's hand fell, and with a crack, his head was cut off. Blood flowed all over the ground. This scene immediately caused the minds of the disciples below to go blank. Their faces were deathly pale, not knowing how to react. Even Ma Shouxiang was startled. He had originally thought that perhaps Zhang Yan was just going to punish them, but he had never imagined that he would really kill them. Zhang Yan's gaze swept over them, causing the remaining 8 to feel a chill in their hearts. They all trembled in fear. He indifferently said, "Kill those 8 as well." Those 8 disciples were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies. They knew that the other party was serious, so they immediately knelt down and cried out, "Monastery head, spare us." The warriors did not care about what they said. They all came up and grabbed each one, pressing them to the ground. Without any hesitation, their blades fell down. With the sound of flesh being cut and bones being cut, 8 heads immediately rolled to the ground, filling the entire area with the stench of blood. Zhang Yan straightened his sleeves and indifferently said to himself, "With a few fewer people, my field of vision has expanded quite a bit. It's just that there are still too many disciples from the lower house." His words, which were filled with killing intent, caused the lower house disciples to feel a chill down their spines. For a moment, they were all silent, trembling with fear. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. Even the 3 leaders were trembling. If he killed so many disciples from the aristocratic families at once, what would they do if the aristocratic families pursued the matter? While they were worried, Zhang Yan was calm and composed, not worried in the slightest. The sect leader had sent him here to choke the necks of the aristocratic families. It was like tying a rope around their necks so that they would obediently submit. To deal with these lower house disciples, there was no need for him to play any tricks. As one of the top 10 disciples of the sect, he could use his power to suppress others. If they did not follow his rules, then he would behead them with a single sword strike. Then he would see who would dare to challenge him. As for the retaliation of the aristocratic families, no matter how great the pressure was, the sect leader would hold it off for him. He would not let him step down immediately after arriving, so he could do whatever he wanted. Zhang Yan looked down and calmly said, "My name is Zhang Yan. Under the orders of the sect leader, I am the leader of the lower house. From now on, whatever I say goes. All you need to do is listen. If you disobey, don't blame my sword for being merciless." Zhang Yan? When the disciples of the lower house heard this name, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This was someone who had formed a first-grade Dan, one of the top 10 disciples of the sect. After the shock, they all complained incessantly in their hearts. How could they have known that the sect would send such a great deity here? At that moment, they felt that Senior Han and the others had really died unjustly. Chapter 353. P.S. Tomorrow at midnight. After Zhang Yan killed 9 people in a row, he immediately set down several strict rules. The slightest carelessness would result in expulsion from the lower house. The 3 outlooks of the Azure Parasol Mountain were in a state of chaos. It should be known that Zhang Yan was not only the head of the 3 Outlooks Academy, but he was also the pavilion master of the Leaping Heavens Pavilion. Not only was he in charge of the bestowment, but he also had the final say on what kind of abode one would be bestowed if one managed to open one's meridian in the lower house. It could be said that he controlled the path of advancement of the direct disciples from top to bottom, forcing them to obediently listen to him. When the clans received the news, it was already a day later. Just as they were still hesitating, Zhang Yan made another move. 20 years ago, when he was in the lower house, there were only 28 disciples. Later on, including him, there were only 29. Even so, the bestowment from the school was still insufficient. Now that the 3 Pools Lake demon had been eliminated, the bestowment was more generous, expanding to 36 people. Now that he had eliminated 9 people, he had to make up for them. On that day, Zhang Yan wrote a letter to Qimeng Jiao. The latter naturally understood and sent 4 disciples over without batting an eyelid. The 4 were chosen from the 9 cities. All of them had outstanding aptitudes, and their eyes were like peach blossoms. Zhang Yan did not ask who their master was. He arranged for the Wang sisters to enter the lower house with them, and they were also listed as direct disciples. Not only that, But he also spread the word that the disciples of the clans, and the Thousand Frost chart were allowed to cultivate in the lower house. These small clans could not be compared to the 5 great clans and the 12 great houses, especially the 3000 Frost chart. They were all disciples from declining clans. If they did not have a rare opportunity, they would not have a chance to stand out. In the past, the spots for the lower house disciples were all taken by the 17 clans, and there was no place for them at all. However, Zhang Yan had set a precedent. After hearing the news, many disciples from small clans were shocked at first, but then they became restless. Everyone could tell that the revival of the master and disciple line was imminent, and the general trend was already unstoppable. Since he was willing to give them this chance, why would they refuse? Now that Zhang Yan was in charge, who would dare to make such a move? If someone else was in charge of the academy, who could guarantee that they would have the courage to do so? Therefore, even though many people were worried about the reaction of the great clans and were still watching, there were indeed some bold people who ran over. Zhang Yan picked and chose, and added 3 more people. One of them was from a prestigious family, and the other 2 were from humble backgrounds. Soon, the quota of 36 disciples was filled. This action was like a thorn stuck in the throats of the 5 great clans and the 12 great chambers. They couldn't swallow it, and they couldn't spit it out either. After some discussion, they pretended that nothing had happened and left the matter unsettled. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Zhang Yan was inspecting a disciple's homework. He was examining his attainments in etched runes. With just a few questions, the disciple's back was drenched in sweat and his face was pale. Suddenly, he sensed something and looked outside. He raised his sleeves and waved. The disciple felt as if he had been pardoned and quickly retreated. Zhang Yan got up and walked out of the hall. When he arrived in front of the temple, he saw a gray-robed Taoist with deep eyes and thin cheeks standing there. He was looking at the greenery on the mountain. His expression changed, and he calmly walked forward and cupped his hands. "So it's senior brother Hua. I apologize for not going out to greet you." Hua Xian turned around and smiled amiably. He returned the greeting. "Junior brother Zhang, you're too polite." Zhang Yan saw that Hua Xian's eyes were filled with countless emotions, but it gave off an extremely lonely and vast feeling. He found it quite strange. During the competition that day, Hua Xian didn't give off such a feeling. Thinking about it, Hua Xian thought that it was because Hua Xian's cultivation had improved after breaking through the Yuanying realm. Hua Xian tilted his head and looked down the mountain. He sighed. "I haven't been here for more than 200 years, but the scenery on the mountain is still the same. I can't help but think of you. Junior brother Zhang, I'm also from the Han book, and I know that it's not easy for these disciples to cultivate. You've given them a way out, and I'm very gratified." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. If senior brother Hua says that, then someone must be dissatisfied. Hua Xian smiled. His voice turned deep as he said, "That wife of mine wanted me to suppress you after hearing about your deeds in the lower house. It's laughable. How could a mediocre person like her understand the thoughts in my heart?" Zhang Yan heard that Hua Xian wasn't polite to his cultivation companion. When he said the words, "beloved wife," his tone was also cold. Even though Hua Xian was the leader of the 10 great disciples and had cultivated the Yuanying realm today, he'd married into the Chen clan with the identity of Han Book in the end, so his status in the clan was probably not high. At this moment, a clear and long cry of a goose suddenly sounded out from the sky, and both of them couldn't help but raise their heads to look over. Hua Xian watched for a while before he suddenly sighed. "Junior brother Zhang, the Grand Tao is difficult to seek. Even if I enter the Yuanying realm, I'll only be able to enjoy a lifespan of 1,000 years. I don't feel any joy from entering this realm, and I feel like I'm walking on thin ice instead. The devil tribulation comes first among the 3 great tribulations, and the slightest carelessness would cause me to be annihilated. I have no choice but to be careful." It was the first time Zhang Yan had heard of the 3 great tribulations. But when he saw Hua Xian seem to have no intention of speaking deeply about it, he thought in his heart, "I'll definitely ask Zhou Changju when I'm free and see if he knows." Hua Xian's gaze descended once more and glanced at Qin Shi before he stretched his hand into his sleeve and withdrew an item, and he passed it over. This item is called the Cloud Mist Veil, and it's something I used when I broke through my shell all those years ago. I'm the son-in-law of the Chun clan, and my disciples are all disciples of the Chun clan as well, so I don't like them. This treasure is useless to me, so I'll give it to you, junior brother. Zhang Yan smiled lightly and accepted it calmly, and then he cupped his hands and said, "Then thank you, senior brother Hua." He'd never refused a gift that others gave him. As for whether others would misunderstand him accepting Hua Xian's gift, only a useless person would think like that. Presently, he was one of the 10 great disciples, and his status was established. Only others would instead think about how to get on his good side, and they wouldn't fuss about such a small matter. Hua Xian smiled as well, and then he said, "Junior brother Zhang, cultivate well. Presently, I'm the leader of the 10 great disciples, so if there's anything you don't understand in your cultivation, you can come seek guidance from me. Your accomplishments in the future won't be inferior to me. Farewell." He cupped his hands before flashing up, and he transformed into a golden red ray of light that tore through the sky and flew off. Zhang Yan pondered in his heart. Hua Xian coming here today is surely related to me taking over the lower house. But this person's methods are brilliant, and he didn't use a forceful manner and instead spoke warmly and amiably. From the beginning until the end, he didn't persuade me at all. Chen Shi couldn't help but smile. Even if this person didn't come, he wouldn't make any further moves. Currently, he had the position of minister of the lower house because he was one of the 10 great disciples in the sect, and he was able to obtain this position because of his cultivation. Cultivation was the foundation, so he naturally wouldn't put the cart before the horse and lose his original intention. He put his hands behind his back and gazed into the distance. In the next few days, he would have to cultivate painstakingly in order to break through the shell and step into the second level of the core transformation realm as soon as possible. Another 3 days passed. Zhang Yan had sorted out everything, and then he passed the subsequent matters to the 3 of them. Meanwhile, he took the dragon merchant star cauldron that was buried here all those years ago, and then he left the lower courtyard in a carefree manner. He soared up into the sky and flew towards the southeast towards the Skynet courtyard. This courtyard was one of the 9 courtyards in the sect, and it was a floating province in the Sea of Clouds. The rules here were strict, and other than the 10 great disciples in the sect, only disciples who had made great contributions to the sect could enter. Even so, they had to be accompanied by a master before they could enter. Zhang Yan's sword escape was godly, and it didn't take long before he saw the true appearance of an island in the clouds with clear water and fragrant flowers. There was a mountain on this island, and there was a soil platform that reached the top of the clouds. It was a stargazing tower, and there were 3 9-story pavilions on both sides. They were all built with jade, and the doors were arched. There was no horizontal board on them, and they leaned against the cliff wall. Flowers were planted around them, and the materials of the platform were elegant, and the jade and spring were mixed together, not tainted by impurities. Zhang Yan's sword light disappeared, and he landed in front of the pavilion. He walked up a small gravel path, and the faint sound of zither drifted into his ears. He tilted his head to listen carefully, and only felt that it was profound, and his mind was calm and clear. At the entrance of the mountain, a deacon Taoist waved his horsetail whisk and walked forward. He bowed and said, "Master Zhang, please excuse me for not welcoming you." Zhang Yan's eyes turned, and he bowed slightly. He stepped into the forbidden door, and when he looked up, he saw an uncountable number of cave metals. Among them were bundles of jade scrolls, and they were neatly arranged. They circled the walls, and he couldn't see the end of them. They all emitted a bright light that illuminated the place. There were also 4 arched doors in the east, south, west, and north, which led to other caves. Just as he was about to step forward, he saw a female practitioner in a pink dress standing in the corridor to his left. She had a beautiful silhouette, and she was holding a scroll in her hand, flipping through a book. She seemed to notice someone looking at her, and she looked back. Her eyebrows moved, and she said, "So it's junior brother Zhang. Greetings." Zhang Yan bowed and returned the greeting and said, "Senior sister Han, greetings." Han Suyi nodded, and at that moment, a girl ran out, holding a book in her hand. She cheered, "Master, master, I found it." Han Sui frowned and scolded, "How can you behave like this in front of a master? Hurry up and greet Master Zhang." The girl's eyes widened, and she looked curiously at Zhang Yan. She mimicked an adult and said, "Bi Xin greets Master." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. Han Sui grabbed the girl and held her hand. She said calmly, "Junior brother Zhang, you must be looking for the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures, right? This is not difficult. You can find it in the northern pagoda cave, but if it is another cultivation method, it will be difficult to find. The Taoist books here are as vast as the sea, too many to count. I only found a suitable Taoist book for my disciple, and it took me 3 days. It is quite exhausting. Shitty needs to be patient." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands. "Thank you for the advice, Sister Ge." Han Sui didn't say anything more. She bowed and then left with the girl. Zhang Yan had an idea, and he smiled. He called the deacon Taoist over and said, "Is there a cultivation method suitable for female cultivators?" The deacon Taoist looked embarrassed and said, "Reporting to Master Zhang, I'm only here and I don't really know about the book." Zhang Yan didn't say much, and he just took out a pot of spirit beads from his sleeve and handed it over. The Taoist was surprised at first, and then he beamed with joy. He put away the spirit beads, and his expression became a lot warmer. He bowed and said, "Master Zhang, the school will be in seclusion for a few days, so I'll take care of the chores here. Please wait a moment, I'll go find it for you." Zhang Yan waited for less than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, and the Taoist hurried back. He handed over a jade scroll, nodded, and bowed and said, "Master Zhang, there are 300 cultivation methods suitable for female cultivators in this jade scroll, and they are divided into upper, middle, and lower levels. I've categorized them and added notes. The cultivation method that Master Han and disciple chose is also in there." Chapter 354. Zhang Yan sat in Jingluo Yard for less than half a day, but he had already read through the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures and memorized them in his heart. As for the 12 divine arts, he was not in a hurry to look at them. Divine arts were indeed attractive, but he had not broken through his shell and had no time to study them. He also did not know which divine art was suitable for him. If he looked at it now, it would only mess up his state of mind, and there was no benefit to it. Thus, he decisively left it behind. The cultivation methods in the pagoda cave were not only limited to Taoism Shen techniques, there were also many secret manuals of cultivation methods, and even rare cultivation methods. However, when he took a look, he found that they were incomplete and not much better than the records of travel notes and legends, so he could only shake his head and pass. The Taoist was quite attentive after receiving his benefits. Whenever there was anything that needed to be looked at, he would open the door wide and busy himself. When it was midday, Zhang Yan wanted to leave. Seeing that the Taoist had worked hard, he gave the Taoist a basket of jade beads. The Taoist was overjoyed and personally sent him out. After leaving Jingluo Yard, Zhang Yan rode the wind and broke through the clouds, returning to Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. Not long after, he returned to the cave dwelling. After a ray of light entered the hall, he looked up and saw a lantern hanging high in front of the hall, and a pearl hanging in the air. He knew that there was a guest. After thinking for a while, he cast a spell to activate the formation and called Shang Shang over. He asked, "Who is it that has come to visit?" Shang Shang bowed and reported, "Master, I heard that Master has obtained the position of the top 10 disciple in the sect. North Star Sect's Elder Yen brought his Taoist companion here to congratulate you. Sister Luo Xiao is now in the hall greeting them." Zhang Yan's expression changed slightly. So Elder Yen had arrived. He waved his sleeve and dismissed Shang Shang, then opened the formation door and stepped in. Just now, when he stood still in the main hall, he saw Elder Yen sitting on the banquet table. Beside him were White Sky Demon King Lu Mainyang and her brother Lu Junbai. Not far away from them was Demon King Junyu, Jing Miaojuan. When Elder Yen saw Zhang Yan, he hurriedly stood up to welcome him. He laughed loudly and cupped his fists, saying, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, I haven't seen you in 3 years, and you're even more elegant than before." Zhang Yan walked forward and returned the greeting with a smile, saying, "Elder Yan's cultivation is becoming more and more solid." Seeing Zhang Yan appear, the Lu siblings and Monster King Junyue also came out of their seats and greeted him respectfully. Zhang Yan saw that the three of them seemed to be restraining themselves. He thought for a while and understood the reason, so he smiled and extended his hand. He said in a clear voice, "According to our agreement, the three of you have come here. You can cultivate in my clear Serenity Cave abode, no restrictions on staying or leaving." When the three heard this, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Elder Yen also smiled. This was especially so for Lu Mainyang. When Zhang Yan left the outer seas, she was still at the Mystic Light Realm and was only a core disciple of Qinsong School. She could still treat him as an equal, but now, Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School. He was also at the Transformation Core Realm like her, and his status was completely different from before. She was nervous and didn't know if the previous agreement would still be the same. However, Elder Yen was certain. He had sent his grandson to visit Zhang Yan a long time ago. Seeing that there were many beauties in the abode, he knew that Zhang Yan didn't reject Yao cultivators. Although he was one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School, he didn't have many disciples. He would need to find help from the outside and take in disciples to strengthen his wings. He wouldn't reject a few Transformation Core Yao cultivators that came to join him. Monster Monarch Junyu stood behind Lu Mainyang and secretly looked at Zhang Yan. After entering this place, her heart wasn't as calm as it looked. Just now, she knew what a profound sect was. This clear Serenity Heavenly Lake was indeed a cave abode. The spirit chi here was many times more abundant than their previous abodes. If they could cultivate here, they would have a high chance of breaking through to the Yuanying realm. Thinking about this, they couldn't help but feel worried. However, Zhang Yan's words calmed them down. Lu Mainyang's face was filled with joy and she said, "Thank you, Estate Lord Zhang." Zhang Yan didn't purposely correct her when she changed the way she addressed him. Before entering the abode, they obviously called each other Taoist. Now that they were in the abode, these three were his guests. Of course, he couldn't be as casual as before. After chatting with them for a while, they sat down and drank a few cups. When the banquet was full, Elder Yen smiled and said, "Today, I have something to give to Taoist. I'm sure you will like it." Zhang Yan put down his cup and smiled. "What is it?" Elder Yen waved his hand and a disciple standing behind him came forward and presented the gift list in his hand. Zhang Yan saw that Elder Yen didn't say it clearly and still wanted to give him the gift list, so he guessed that it must be something valuable. When he took a look, the three words, Penglai Qi, came into view. He thought for a while. Although he hadn't heard of this item, it must be extraordinary. That was why he was so serious. Elder Yan's expression became serious. His lips moved and he used a secret voice to explain the function of this treasure. Then, his expression became serious and he cupped his hands together. "This is our sect's secret. I hope Taoist will not tell others." Zhang Yan also stopped smiling and raised his hand to return the greeting. He said seriously, "Rest assured, Elder. Your sect has given such a valuable gift. How can I not know what's good for me? I am ashamed to accept your kindness." Elder Yen nodded and raised his cup. "Come, let me drink to you." He believed that Zhang Yan knew what he was doing. However, this item was too rare. Out of caution, he had to mention it. If it were to circulate in the outside world, Beichen sect would immediately attract the covetous eyes of the disciples of the big sections. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the sect would be destroyed. After the banquet, Elder Yen said that he had some matters to attend to in the sect and had to return early. He then bid farewell and left. Zhang Yan didn't ask him to stay. He personally saw the elder out of the cave and then returned to settle down the Lu siblings and Monster King Junyue. When the matter was over, he returned to the main residence and ordered the servants to summon Luo Xiao. He handed her the jade scroll from Jing Luo Yard. He smiled. "Taoist Luo, in this scroll, there are 300 books of mysterious techniques. Taoist Luo can choose one to practice. I will leave this with you. If Taoist Luo wants to take in a disciple, you can also pass on the techniques. Don't worry about anything." Many of these techniques were written by the elders of the Qinsong school, but some were obtained from outside the sect. Among them, there were many techniques that could be practiced to the Yuanying realm. However, the path of cultivation could not be achieved by just relying on techniques. Spiritual houses, magical items, elixirs, and techniques were all indispensable. If one was a rogue cultivator, he would only have one Taoist technique. Without the secret inheritance, it would be impossible to practice to a higher realm. Just like Huang Fuzhou, he obtained an immortal residence. Just now, he had his current cultivation. If he only had techniques, he might not be much better than ordinary disciples. When Zhang Yan mentioned it that day, even though Luo Xiao didn't say it out loud, she remembered it in her heart. Now that she saw that he really found a Taoist technique for her, she was overjoyed. Her beautiful eyes turned and she said, "I thank you, Master. Since you already have 4 disciples, I have to take in a few good ones no matter what. I won't let Master monopolize." Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. If Taoist Luo has this intention, it is a good thing. Although I am one of the top 10 disciples, there are still very few disciples under Zhao Yu. I can't compare to other disciples. If Taoist Luo wants to take in disciples, just tell me what you lack. I will not be stingy. When Luo Xiao heard this, she was even more surprised. She thanked him repeatedly. She chatted with Zhang Yan for a while. After that, she lifted the hem of her dress and left happily. After Luo Xiao left, Zhang Yan was about to sit down and meditate. However, he suddenly felt something and said, "Is Yenny here? Why are you wandering outside? Come in and talk." A shadow flashed in front of the cave. Lu Yenny walked in. She took a few steps forward and knelt on the ground, kowtowing heavily. Zhang Yan asked curiously, "Disciple, why are you doing this?" Lu Yenny raised her head and said seriously, "Master, disciple has thought about it for a long time. I want to go out and travel in search of the medicine to transform the pill. I hope Master will allow it." Zhang Yan was slightly stunned and started to ponder. Actually, not to mention that he still had a lot of pills that he had not used with his current identity, he only needed to say the word and he would be able to find all 3 pills. However, he also knew that disciples of Master and Disciple went out to search for medicine not only for the pill itself, but also to train their temperament and look for opportunities. Her disciple was not afraid of danger and was not willing to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. It was very rare for her to have such thoughts. After some thought, Zhang Yan felt that now that the competition in the sect was over and there was nothing to do in the house, it should be a period of peace. He also had to cultivate in seclusion, so it was a good time for Lu Yenny to go out and travel. He nodded and said, "I am very pleased that you have such thoughts." Lu Yenny's beautiful eyes were filled with joy and she bowed. "Thank you, Master, for granting my wish." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "Since you have left the mountain, if you see the qi of the fire essence and the qi of the metal essence, take some back. However, remember, there is no need to deliberately search for them." Lu Yenny nodded and said, "Disciple will remember." Zhang Yan said again, "The land of Donghua continent is still considered stable, but the demonic calamity is about to happen. It is inevitable that there will be evil spirits stirring up trouble. I will give you a few more treasures to help you defend yourself." He stretched out a finger, and a nimble and fleeting light ray flew out. It spun in midair and disappeared into Lu Yenny's sachet. But a moment later, another array flag followed and disappeared into the sachet. That spiritual light was called the boating boat pouch. It was one of the 2 profound level weapons passed down by Gui Zongyao. When fighting with the enemy, it could turn into a bright crystal sand to protect the user. At the crucial moment, it could also hide the body, making it impossible for others to find it. The most amazing thing was that this item could turn into a tent and gather spiritual qi on its own, so it did not hinder cultivation. And that formation flag was the Zhu Yuan Yingxing 3 Qi Palace Guard flag that protected Tian Kuan and his mother. Once this formation flag was set up, even the Yuanying cultivators could not do anything to it. Then, Zhang Yan shouted again, "Where is Mountain River Boy?" Following his shout, a child came out and respectfully said, "Master, this lowly one is here." Zhang Yan pointed at Lu Yenny and said, "My disciple wants to go out to look for medicine. You can go with her." Mountain River Boy immediately said in a clear voice, Yes, I will obey Master's order. Only a true weapon like him did not have a way to injure the enemy or protect it, so it had a good temper. It would do whatever it was told to do, diligently and without any complaints. For a true weapon like that, even if it was to its owner, it would sometimes be cold and indifferent, so why would it take care of a junior? Zhang Yan said gently to Lu Yenyi, Mountain River Boy is very knowledgeable. It will be convenient for you to travel the world with this map. Lu Yenyi hurriedly bowed again and said, Thank you for your gift, Master. Zhang Yan asked gently, Yenyi, when are you leaving? Lu Yenyi answered, Disciples' medicine and instruments are all prepared. I wanted to leave after bidding farewell to Master. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. Since that is the case, Master will send you off. Then he rolled up his sleeves and a mist appeared, wrapping Lu Yenyi out of the cave. In an instant, they arrived at the peak of Zhaoyu Mountain. There were white clouds, the sky was blue like a mirror, birds flew across the sky, the pond water was rippling, and fish were jumping on the waves. It was a beautiful scenery. Master, please stay. I will go now. Lu Yenyi's face was determined. She knelt down and kowtowed 3 times to Zhang Yan respectfully. Then, she stood up and took out a spell. She turned into a clear rainbow, pierced through the clouds and flew into the sky. She embarked on the road to look for medicine alone. Once she left, she probably wouldn't be able to return within 20 to 30 years. Zhang Yan gazed silently at the streak of light that flew into the distance, and he smiled lightly after it vanished before he turned around and returned to the small pot mirror to enter into closed-door cultivation. Chapter 355. Zhang Yan sat on top of the small pot mirror bamboo house. First, he placed a boat full of true sand in front of the house. After sitting silently for a moment, he scooped out the surreal mist yarn that Huoxian had given him. With a shake of his hand, he cast a spell in the air. A ray of light was released, and the dense qi seemed to carry a thin gauze. It spun around the boat full of true sand, grinding it into dust, turning it into strands of incomparably pure essence qi that floated out. Although he already knew that this item was powerful, he couldn't help but be happy when he saw its effect. With the help of this item, he didn't have to spend too much time refining the true sand every day. The magic treasure that Huoxian gave him, if it was in the past, would not be of much use. The reason was that a person could only absorb a limited amount of essence qi in a day. After the essence qi entered the body, there was still a need to move the jindan. For example, if he were to absorb a boat full of true sand essence qi, it would take almost a day and a night to transform it into his own. Finally, it would be refined into Dan Fiend. Just like a mortal's daily meal, although they could eat more, there was always a limit. Otherwise, they would only be stuffed to death. But now it was different. The reason was all because of the magic treasure that Qi Yuntian had lent him. This treasure was called the Golden Dust Furnace. After it was ignited, it would emit a mysterious and unusual fragrance. When absorbing the true sand essence qi, if he swallowed it with this strange fragrance, the speed at which he absorbed the essence qi would be several times faster. In other words, he could swallow 2 or even 3 boats of true sand essence qi in a day. Ning Chang's Xian core had reached the 2nd grade, but he was able to break through the shell in less than 20 years. He was relying on the help of this treasure. This item was even more useful to Zhang Yan. If he wanted to break through the shell, there were 2 steps. The first step was to first hone the Dan Fiend in his body to the point where it could not be increased, and the second step was to try to break through this barrier. And his Dan had reached the 1st grade, which meant that the time he needed to accumulate Dan Fiend was much longer than that of other people. With the help of this item, he could save even more time. He thought about it carefully. Apart from these 2 treasures that could help him break through the chakra, he also had the 6 mouthfuls of Penglai Qi that Elder Yen gave him. This item was extremely rare and could actually greatly increase a cultivator's chances of breaking through to the next realm. It would be a waste if he only used it to break through his shell. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to put this treasure away and use it in the future. Putting the item into his sleeve, he sat down in a lotus position and looked into his body. Now, as Zhang Yin accumulated more and more pill fiends, he could already see that outside the golden core, there was a layer of clear light that seemed to be circulating. The pearl and jade shone brilliantly. There were 9 openings on this object, and the pill fiend entered and exited from within. This was the aperture membrane. It coexisted with the pill fiend and was formed from the turbid qi expelled from the golden core. The more abundant the pill fiendish qi accumulated, the thicker the membrane shell became. When the pill fiendish qi could no longer increase, it condensed into the thickest barrier, limiting the pill fiendish qi's surging momentum. As a result, when a first-tier core transformation cultivator used their pill fiend, they could not release it in one go. They could only slowly come out from the 9 apertures and use it to fight the enemy. Moreover, as long as half of it came out, it would be blocked by this layer of membrane. It would not come out again. Therefore, whether it was using Fa Li or using supernatural powers, a first-tier core transformation cultivator was far inferior to a second-tier core transformation cultivator. Only by breaking the door and shattering the shell could one enter and exit unhindered. During the sect competition, Feng Zhen's cultivation method was called a supernatural power because it could temporarily open the aperture of the shell and release the pill fiend qi at one go, allowing him to use it at will. However, this supernatural power was created by Duda. It was only to confirm a certain idea in his heart and had not been perfected. In the end, it was a trick. The pill fiend was easy to come out but difficult to go back. Every time it was used, not only did it have to be slowly restrained, it would also damage one's essence qi. Therefore, this supernatural power was only suitable to be used when fighting for one's life. After Zhang Yin looked inside for a moment, he gradually gathered his thoughts. Right now was not the time to think about breaking the shell, but to increase the pill fiend qi first. He sat on the couch and first lit up the golden dust furnace. Then he released the boat full of true sand and took out the blue mist gauze. He then began to slowly refine it. 7 years had passed since he went into seclusion. On this day, he suddenly felt that no matter how much essence qi he absorbed, the pill fiend qi that was originally growing slowly did not increase by even a little. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes and he slowly let out a long breath. He knew that he had reached the peak. However, it was not over yet. He reached into his sleeve and scooped out the origin-leaving essence jade. This was what he obtained at the Great Pill Magic Conference. This item was one of the few treasures in the world that could increase the pill fiend qi. He himself was already a grade 1 core and had obtained the rare and strong pill fiend qi. If he had the help of this item, he did not know how far he could grow in the end. However, he also had to consider that after refining this item, his shell would become even thicker. However, since this item could increase his strength, why would he give it up just because he was afraid that he would not be able to break through the shell? Thinking about this, he took out the blue mist gauze and ground it against the origin-leaving essence jade. However, he found that it did not move at all. Zhang Yin was not surprised. He did not think that this item would be so strong. He thought about it carefully and after a while, he smiled. He raised his hand and swallowed the origin-leaving essence jade and placed it into his stomach to refine. He used the pill fiend qi and slowly ground it. He melted the essence jade bit by bit and then refined it into his body, turning it into his own essence qi. This round of grinding took about 100 days. Just now, he had completely refined it. At this moment, he felt as if his body was heavy and floating. With a loud shout, he shook his shoulder, causing the entire small pot mirror to shake. At this moment, the pill evil qi in his abdomen was as vast as the sea and as vast as the clouds. It was many times stronger than before. When he looked at the shell again, he saw that it was like a piece of transparent golden jade. It tightly wrapped the golden core and only traces of pill fiend qi like white smoke were flying around the 9 orifices. At this step, he needed to think about how to break through this barrier. Just as he was deep in thought, he heard the sound of a bell outside. It was long and drawn out, going straight into his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. This meant that someone outside the cave urgently wanted to see him. Just now, this bell would ring. He shouted, "Where is the mirror spirit?" As soon as he finished speaking, a black-robed scholar came out and bowed respectfully. "Master, this lowly one is here." Zhang Yan pointed to the outside and asked, "What happened outside the mansion?" The mirror spirit bowed and said, "Master, it is Fan Chongqing who came to the mansion. He seems to have something important to see you." Zhang Yan thought in his heart, "Since Fan Chongqing came here, he should know that I am in retreat. He will never disturb me for such a small thing for no reason. There must be something important to discuss." He changed his mind and decided that he might as well end his cultivation just now so that he could go out for a while. Thinking of this, he shook his sleeves and came out of the small pot mirror. He walked into the array door and came to the hall in an instant. Fan Chongqing was walking back and forth in the hall with a frown, as if he had encountered something difficult. Suddenly, he felt movement behind him, and when he turned around to look, he unconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands and said with an apologetic expression, "Junior brother Zhang, it's my fault for disturbing your closed-door cultivation." Zhang Yan chuckled and returned the greeting. "It's fine. But senior brother seems to be so anxious. May I know what's the matter?" "Hey," Fan Chongqing snorted and said, "Since Shidi has come out of closed-door training, there is no need to hurry. This matter must be explained clearly to you, otherwise it will be really difficult to make sense of it." Zhang Yan smiled and ordered the maids to serve tea. Then he said, "Come, senior brother, sit down first and tell me slowly." After the two of them took their seats, Fan Chongqing tilted his head and suddenly sneered, "Junior brother, do you know that Fang Zhenlu almost had an arm chopped off when he was sparring with someone in a gambling fight?" Zhang Yan was surprised. "What's going on? Who did it?" Fang Zhenlu was one of the top 10 disciples in the sect. Zhang Yan had seen his skills before. Although he was not as good as Duda and Xiaosha, he was far above normal disciples. Since he gambled with him, his cultivation must not be far. But among the same generation, there were very few who could beat him. Even if they could, they would not be so ruthless because of Lady Chen. Fan Chongqing looked at Zhang Yan, sighed, and said, "Speaking of which, this matter is not unrelated to junior brother Zhang." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean?" Fan Chongqing said in a low voice, "The person who injured Fang Zhenlu is a disciple of the Shaoqing sect. It is said that he is related to a few of the sect's elders. His name is Ing Minzhang. He came with his senior brother, Cho Kuan. He heard that you are one of the top 10 disciples, so he came to visit you. Ing Minzhang heard that you have a first-grade core, so he wanted to compete with you. He wanted to gamble with you, but..." He smiled bitterly. He did not think that junior brother Zhang would be in seclusion. Jin Minzhang could not find an opponent. He probably thought that you are ranked 9th, so he wanted to find junior brother Ning to fight. But junior brother Ning was condensing the true seal, so he left the sect. Maybe he guessed that he was not a match for senior brother Luo and Han Sui, so he went to find Fang Zhenlu. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He moved his fingers and said, "Is the Shaoqing sect disciple really that powerful?" Fan Chongqing shook his head and said mockingly, "Not really. Ing Minzhang is only 14 years old. He is not a match for Fang Zhenlu in terms of cultivation. He is just relying on a flying sword that was given to him by an elder." But Fang Zhenlu did not know about this. He thought that Ing Minzhang was a naughty child playing around, so he did not take it to heart when they fought. He just wanted to play along. But he did not expect that he would lose face. Zhang Yan shook his head. This matter could only be blamed on Fang Zhenlu's carelessness. He underestimated his opponent, and as a result, many cultivators were defeated. Then he frowned slightly and said in a very strange manner, "Senior brother Fan, since it's the matter between Fang Zhenlu and Jin Minzhang, how did it involve me?" Chapter 356. After Fan Chongqing told the whole story, Zhang Yan now knew the reason for this matter. That day, when Cho Kuan saw that his junior brother had caused this matter, he thought that since they were in the wrong, he wanted to apologize and send some medicine over. Actually, in the Shaoqing sect, injuries were common. The disciples in the sect fought almost every day and there was never a day where there was no blood, so he didn't care about it at all. But when Fang Zhenlu's cultivation companion, Madame Chen, heard of this, she flew into a rage. She borrowed a magic treasure and personally took down Jin Minzhang, locking him in the back courtyard. She kept saying that she wanted Cho Kun to call his master over and have him personally take him away. Like this, Cho Kun was furious. He left the Chinsong school and built a hut outside the sect. He said that if the Chen family didn't let him go, he wouldn't leave. If the Chen family had the ability, they would keep Jin Minzhang in the sect for the rest of his life. Even if they killed him, there would be no need to ask who killed him since there would be people who would come to kill his disciple. The Shaoqing sect had always been tough, but they never stood up for their disciple. If their disciple wasn't strong enough, they could kill him. If they had the chance, they would also come to kill their disciple. So for 7 years, Cho Kun lived outside the sect and really didn't care about anything. Madame Chen also felt that this matter was troublesome. If this matter continued, there would be a rift between the two sects and the sect leader would find an excuse to deal with them. That would be bad. However, if they ended it like this, it would be a great loss of face. They couldn't let him go and they couldn't punish him. This matter could have been solved with just a bit of explanation, but now both sides were in a difficult situation. No one was willing to lower their heads and admit defeat, so they were still in a deadlock. Fan Chongqing cupped his hands and persuaded, "Junior brother Zhang, since you are old friends with Cho Kun, why don't you go and mediate this matter?" Zhang Yan thought about it for a bit before asking, "What did the Shaoqing sect say?" Fan Chongqing gave a laugh and said, "What else can they do? I'll just pretend I don't know. It is fortunate that this is my Chinsong school. The Shaoqing sect isn't willing to fall out with me over such a small matter. If it were sects like South Flower or Origin Sun, I'm afraid that quite a few of their traveling disciples would have been killed." Zhang Yan asked again, "This matter happened several years ago. Why did you only mention it today?" Fan Chongqing sneered and said, "Isn't that because the Chen clan couldn't put down their pride at first? But now, they are unwilling to hold this hot potato in their hands, so they softened their attitude and asked eldest senior brother for help. But eldest senior brother told me to come to you, saying that you must have a way, so he rushed me here." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and nodded with a smile. "Don't worry, leave this matter to me. Sai, since you what did you say?" Fan Chongqing suddenly raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan. He couldn't help but feel surprised. This kind of matter was avoided by others. If they won, they would become enemies, and if they lost, they would lose face. Actually, he had already been prepared for Zhang Yan to refuse, but he didn't expect him to actually agree. So he found it hard to believe and was stunned for a while before trying to probe, "Junior brother Zhang, have you really thought it through?" Zhang Yan couldn't help but smile and said, "Senior brother Qi once gave me the golden dust furnace to use, so I owe him a favor. Since senior brother Fan asked senior brother Qi to come, how can I not give him face? There is no time to lose, so I will go with senior brother." Fan Chongqing was overjoyed. He said repeatedly, "Good, good, junior brother is righteous. I will take you to Cho Kun's place." Zhang Yan waved his hand and said with a smile, "Why would I go to Cho Kun? There is no need for him to appear." Fan Chongqing was startled and asked carefully, "Then who is junior brother going to find?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Whoever started the trouble should untie it. I'm going to find that Jin Minchang." Fan Chongqing's expression changed, and his expression became cautious. He said, "Junior brother, what are you planning?" He was worried that Zhang Yan would do something again. Since that time when Zhang Yan successfully persuaded Qi Yuntian to abdicate and he himself became one of the top 10 disciples, he knew that he had underestimated this junior brother in the past. He had to think twice about each of his actions and didn't dare to be careless. Zhang Yan laughed and said, "Senior brother Fan, if you want me to solve this matter, then there is no need to ask more. Just do as I say." Fan Chongqing was helpless. Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples, and his status was far above him. He could only say, "Okay, since junior brother has an idea, then I will not ask more. Come with me." Fang Zhenlu's abode was in the northeast of Longyan Lake, on the island of Yanlong continent. The two of them rode on the clouds at an extremely fast speed and arrived here in a moment. Zhang Yan looked at this place from the clouds. This place was like a prosperous and magnificent scene in the human world. On the continent, there was a small city that occupied a large area. The houses were row upon row. On the north side, there was a strange mountain with peach blossoms and willows. The fragrance of flowers assailed the nostrils, and it was magnificent and gorgeous. In front of the mountain, there was a winding river that flowed out and surrounded the whole city. Fan Changqing pointed down and said, "All the houses here are the property of the Chen clan, and the people who live here are all disciples of the Chen clan. There are restrictions in the city, so it is inconvenient for outsiders to fly. Let's descend the clouds and enter the city." Zhang Yan naturally had no objection. For people like them, it was not much different from flying. The two of them withdrew the clouds and landed outside the city. At this time, a disciple on the city tower saw the two of them riding on the clouds. He immediately knew that it was the sect's core transformation cultivators, so he hurriedly came up to ask. Fan Changqing stepped forward and explained the purpose of his visit. The disciple did not dare to neglect and sent out a message. Not long after, an old man in embroidered robes came out on a flying boat with a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Please follow me. Madam is waiting in the castle." Fan Changqing saw that a servant was sent to greet him and couldn't help but feel a little displeased. Fang Zhenlu hid and didn't want to see him. After all, he had lost a lot of face, so it was understandable. But Madam Chen actually didn't come out either. She was a little too arrogant. However, he was ordered by Qi Yuntian to deal with this matter, so he couldn't just leave. They followed the servant into a big house in the city. After passing through the courtyard, they arrived at a waterside pavilion. The lake was sparkling, and from time to time, there were golden carps jumping around. A maid came up to serve fragrant tea and said softly, "Two distinguished guests, please wait for a moment. Madam will be here soon." The two of them waited for a while before Madam Chen came out to greet them. She was accompanied by a strong servant. She had an oval face and willow-shaped eyebrows. She was elegant and pretty, but her expression was rather arrogant. When she arrived in front of them, she bowed and said, "I've troubled two senior brothers to wait for a long time." Fan Changqing stood up and returned the bow. He pointed at Zhang Yan and said, "This is junior brother Zhang Yan." Madam Chen was startled. She looked at Zhang Yan and her expression became a little more vigilant. She said, "So it's monastery head Zhang. May I know what business you have here?" Zhang Yan wanted to quickly return to cultivate after this matter was settled, so he didn't want to talk too much with her. He said, "I have come to mediate the dispute between the two families. Where is that Jin Min Zhang? Madam, please take me there so this matter can be settled quickly." Madam Chen frowned at first. Then her eyes flickered and she suddenly stretched out her slender hand and slapped the table. "But since monastery head Zhang is willing to go, this matter will definitely be settled. I will thank you here. Xinyan, bring monastery head Zhang to the back courtyard." "Yes, madam." A pretty maidservant came forward and gently said, "Chancellor Zhang, please don't worry. Monastery head Zhang, please follow me." Fan Changqing frowned. Junior brother Zhang was usually so smart. How could he be so muddle-headed? He was so confident and now Madam Chen used her words to suppress him. There was no room for negotiation. If he couldn't settle this matter, he would probably lose all his face. As he thought about it, he saw that Zhang Yan had already left with the servant girl. He was worried and bowed to Madam Chen. He also chased after them. The servant beside Madam Chen said, "Madam, can that Zhang Yan really solve this matter?" Madam Chen snorted and said with some schadenfreude, "Shaoqing Sek's brat has a smelly and stubborn temper. He doesn't move by force or persuasion. No matter how many methods we used, it was useless. What ability does that Zhang Yan have? Let's see how he embarrasses himself." Zhang Yan followed the maidservant into the rear courtyard, and he saw an exquisite bamboo house that was surrounded by a bamboo fence. If one looked carefully, one would notice that restrictions and talismans were faintly flickering on the fence. At this moment, there was a young man around the age of 13 or 14 standing in the courtyard with a bored expression, and he was playing with a small sword in his hand. The sword flickered and flickered like silver, and the blade of the sword emanated strands of coldness. Zhang Yan could clearly see that this sword was indeed a true weapon. However, it was different from normal true weapons. It didn't seem to have that intimidating feeling at all. If he had to say it, it was similar to the heavily injured slaughtering gloomy saber. It might even be inferior. This was actually a mother and child sword. The mother sword was kept in the sect, and there were a total of 7 child swords, which were used by the disciples in the sect. If one refined it from a young age, it would be connected with the disciple's mind. What Jin Minzhang obtained was one of them. Just now, he made this child sword recognize him as its master, so he came here to fight with others. When Zhang Yan walked over, the small sword suddenly trembled, as if it encountered something dangerous. The youth unconsciously stroked it and said, "Tong, what's wrong?" Then he seemed to have sensed something and immediately turned around, saying, "Who are you? Are you here to persuade me to go out and apologize again? How many times have I said it? Don't even think about it. You are willing to eat and drink for free and serve me. That's not bad. The scenery here is also very good." Zhang Yan glanced at him and smiled, saying, "You are that Jin Minzhang? I heard that you are looking for an opponent to fight. Do you dare to bet with me?" Jin Minzhang's eyes instantly lit up, and he completely forgot where he was and said happily, "How do you want to bet?" Zhang Yan placed his hands behind his back and said, "I'll stand here. Feel free to attack me. I'll only hit you once. If you can withstand it, then I'll make the decision to let you out. If you can't, then follow me out and apologize to junior brother Fong." Jin Minzhang's eyes lit up. What Zhang Yan said was extremely to his liking. Moreover, after being trapped here for 7 years, even though he was a Taoist, he was still a youth after all, so he felt extremely bored. He didn't care if Zhang Yan could make the decision, so he immediately held his sword horizontally and replied, "All right, fellow Taoist, you must keep your word." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Make your move." Kim Min gave a loud shout and said, "Ah Tong, go." He tossed the small sword into the air and it turned into a long rainbow that flew out. However, when he made a hand seal and chopped down, no matter how he controlled it, the small sword seemed to be extremely afraid of Zhang Yan and refused to fall no matter what. He couldn't help but be anxious to the point that sweat appeared on his forehead. Zhang Yan glanced at him and said, "Are you done? If you still don't make your move, then I'll have to fight back." Jin Minzhang was anxious and didn't control the small sword anymore. He shouted and took out an item from his sleeve. With a toss of his hand, a magical sword was tossed into the air. Then, with a light tremble, it turned into a cloud of silver stars that flew down like countless streams of light. Zhang Yan smiled. His figure didn't move, but he gathered up all the dansha in his body and released it from the top of his head. With a rumble, the rain of swords that covered the sky all rolled back. Jin Minzhang felt a wave of power rush up his body and he flew out in an instant, falling face up to the sky. Zhang Yan said calmly, "You've lost." Jin Minzhang crawled up from the ground. He was quite straightforward and said, "This senior brother, this little brother has lost. I'll go out and apologize right now, but please leave your name so that this little brother will know who I lost to." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "I'm the Zhang Yan that you'll meet in a while." With that he turned around and walked out. Jin Minzhang was startled, then he laughed and shouted in the courtyard, "Madam Chen, please let me out. I'm willing to apologize to your Chen clan." Just now Fan Chongqing had walked to the front of the back courtyard. Before he reached the inner room, he suddenly heard these words. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded, wondering if he had heard wrongly. This was it? For a moment, he suddenly felt that the Chun clan had imprisoned this kid for 7 years and caused the 2 clans to be at daggers drawn. Just what effort did they put in? Chapter 357. Mrs. Chen had never thought that the difficult matter that had troubled the sect for 7 years would be solved so easily by Zhang Yan. She was shocked, but she also acted quickly. She immediately went down the slope and sent Jin Minzhang, this troublesome person, out. It didn't take long for the news to reach the mountain gate. After Cho Kun received the flying sword message, he was surprised but also secretly relieved. After going against the Dark Azure Sect's Chen clan for 7 years, Even if he was a true disciple of the Shaoqing lineage, he felt that he could not take it anymore. If things really got out of hand and there was discord between the two clans, he would not be able to explain it to the sect. On the second day, he brought Jin Minzhang to visit Zhang Yan at the clear nether heavenly lake. The moment he saw him, he bowed and said apologetically, "I heard that senior apprentice brother received the top 10 disciples, so I came to congratulate you. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. I'm sorry for dragging senior apprentice brother into this." Jin Minzhang stood at the side and felt a little embarrassed. They all thought that Zhang Yan had to leave seclusion because of this. When a cultivator was in seclusion, it was a taboo to stop halfway. In serious cases, many years of hard work might go down the drain, so he felt a little guilty. Zhang Yan smiled and waved his hand. "What are you talking about, senior apprentice brother Cho? You and I are old acquaintances. You came to visit us personally, but I didn't receive you well because I was in seclusion. Why don't you stay here for a few days?" Cho Kuan shook his head and sighed. "The clear nether heavenly lake is famous and beautiful. I wanted to stay here for a few days, but I missed my fellow sect members and seniors after not returning for 7 years, so I had no choice but to return." Jin Minzhang also said loudly, "Senior apprentice brother Zhang, I've been here for 7 years, but I've fallen behind in my studies. I'm afraid those junior apprentice brothers are stronger than me now. If I continue to be delayed, they'll leave me far behind." The cultivation techniques of the Shaoqing sect's disciples were very strict. Some cultivation techniques needed to be cultivated from a young age and could no longer be cultivated after the age. When Jin Minzhang was trapped, he was just now 14 years old, but he had been trapped for 7 years. It was the same as not being able to cultivate a superior technique, so he simply used a secret technique to seal his physical body. This technique was extremely profound, and a person could only use it once in their lifetime. Although it was unable to increase their lifespan, there was a benefit to it. In a flash, 7 years had passed, yet he had only grown 1 or 2 years older. At least he hadn't missed the time to cultivate. Zhang Yan nodded. Regretfully, he said, "That's a pity. I won't keep the two of you any longer." In fact, Cho Kuan also had the intention to exchange pointers with Zhang Yan. However, the matter of Jin Minzhang had caused Zhang Yan to interrupt his closed-door meditation. Cho Kuan was too embarrassed to ask again. He was only thinking about how to make it up to Cho Kuan. He raised his head and asked, "Fellow Taoist, what do you think of the sword duel between the 16 sects?" When Zhang Yan heard him suddenly bring up this matter, he knew it wasn't without reason. He couldn't help but pay attention, his eyes slightly focused as he said, "Fellow Taoist has something to say. Why don't you speak your mind?" Cho Kuan said solemnly, "Senior brother Zhang, the sword duel between the 16 sects used to be a battle between the 10 sects of Xian sect. The 6 demon sects would only send 1 or 2 people over to observe. However, now that the demon calamity is about to rise, it might be the sword duel between the 16 sections. You and I will have a duel with that demon sect disciple." He paused for a moment, and seeing that Zhang Yan was listening attentively, he continued, "Senior brother Zhang, you know that the disciples of our Shaoqing sect love to fight. There was once a senior brother who went to the land of the demon sects alone, and he heard that there are many outstanding disciples in the 6 demon sects who are not below our Xian sect. That senior brother of mine had once exchanged blows with one of the disciples of the Jiuling sect. The two of them battled several times, and there were wins and losses on both sides. He had even unintentionally found out from that person that there was a disciple of the Jiuling sect who had outstanding talent, and was praised by the elders of the sect. It was especially so because he had once created a few doppelgangers and entered our 10 sects of Xian sect. It is said that his position within the sect is also rather high." Zhang Yan frowned slightly. He pondered for a moment in his heart. This matter might be possible, but it was more likely that the other party had intentionally released a smokescreen, with the goal of disturbing the hearts of the people. Cho Kuan naturally knew that there was such a possibility as well. Therefore, he said again, "There is no other proof for this matter, so it's best not to publicize it. However, I feel that even if there is such a possibility, we should still be careful and take precautions. What does senior brother Zhang think?" Zhang Yan smiled and agreed. If this matter were to cause a huge commotion, it wouldn't be good if our own sect were to be thrown into chaos before the demon sects have even made a move. He cupped his hands and said, I still have to thank Senior Brother Cho for informing me. Cho Kuan also smiled, stood up and cupped his hands, saying, Senior Brother Zhang is too courteous. We are in a hurry to return to the sect, so it's not convenient for us to stay any longer. We shall take our leave now. In the future, please come to my Shaoqing sect for a visit. I shall welcome you with open arms. Jin Minzhang also stood up and said heartily, Senior Brother Zhang, I am not as good as you today. Let us compete again in the future. Zhang Yan laughed and cupped his hands, saying, If there is a chance, I will definitely accompany you. He also stood up and personally sent the two of them out of the residence. After the two of them left, he just now returned to the residence. At this moment, a maidservant came up and said, Old Master, there is a higher brightness hall elder who claims that his surname is Zhu. He has arrived at the residence and says that he wants to meet Old Master. Zhang Yan knew what was going on and couldn't help but smile lightly, thinking to himself that this person finally couldn't resist coming to find him. He said, Let him come to the main hall to see me. He stepped over the array door and went to the main hall to sit down. Not long after, that elder Zhu was brought to the main hall by the maidservant. He raised his head and saw Zhang Yan sitting on the main seat. On his left and right were two burly men holding golden dagger axes. He already had the air of a residence master. He hurriedly took a few steps forward and bowed, saying, This old man greets Chancellor Zhang. Zhang Yan's expression was calm as he said, Why did Elder Zhu think of coming to my residence today? Elder Zhu waved his long sleeves and let out a long sigh. He then raised his head and said with shame, Chancellor Zhang, previously, Daoren was muddle-headed and actually played mind games in front of the Chancellor. I really shouldn't have. Recently, I feel that my time is coming to an end and I really feel guilty about this matter. I often toss and turn in bed and can't sleep at night. Therefore, I came today to apologize. After the competition that day, his disciple Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan each received a good cave abode. He was also very happy, but he didn't think that when he went to the merit courtyard to receive the reward, he would be told that Lu Yenni, who won first place, had not chosen her cave abode yet. Therefore, it wasn't their turn yet. Elder Zhu went back and asked around. He found out that Lu Yenni went out to find medicine and didn't know how many years it would take for her to return. He felt that something wasn't right, so he personally went to the merit courtyard to ask for the reward. However, this matter was managed by Qi Mingjiao. She said that the winner of the competition didn't choose her cave abode, so how could the disciples after her take it? He had to wait for Lu Yenni to come back before saying anything. Elder Zhu said all kinds of good words, but the other party always refused. He didn't have many friends from the same sect, and even if he knew a few, he couldn't suppress Qi Yuntian's disciple. Even if he had 100 schemes, he couldn't do anything. He could only go back and wait patiently. However, this wait lasted for 7 years. Seeing that his lifespan was coming to an end, and this matter was still far away, he was also very anxious. He knew that he couldn't wait any longer. However, he repeatedly thought about it, but still couldn't figure out where the problem was. He could only thicken his skin and go see Qi Mingjiao. He asked her why she was controlling him like this. Qi Mingjiao also knew that the time was right, so she gave him a few pointers. Just now Elder Zhu suddenly realized that it was Zhang Yan's doing. After knowing the truth, he couldn't help but laugh at himself. He had thought that he had done it secretly. However, he didn't expect that it had been seen through by others, and now the retribution had fallen on his own disciple. After thinking about it carefully, he came to apologize today. Elder Zhu lowered his head. It's all my fault. It's all because I was muddle-headed. I am willing to accept my punishment, but I hope that Chancellor can forgive my 2 disciples on account that we are from the same sect. Zhang Yan glanced at him and raised his eyebrows. Since Elder Zhu has already said it, then I don't mind saying it. Elder Zhu knew that Zhang Yan's actions were out of revenge. He definitely wouldn't see him today, so he definitely had a motive. Feeling a little anxious, he cupped his hands. Chancellor, please tell me. Zhang Yan's bright eyes landed on Elder Zhu. Now that I am one of the top 10 disciples, my residence is lacking people. I think your 2 disciples are not bad. They can come to my residence to cultivate. What do you think? Elder Zhu's eyelids twitched and his heart thumped. He was a little hesitant. Zhang Yanjing sat there quietly and didn't say anything to force him. In fact, he had already planned to do this long before the competition. Now that the demonic calamity was on the rise, he had to make early arrangements to nurture some disciples to work for him. There were many disciples in his lineage, but there weren't many who were outstanding. Most of them were chosen by others to become disciples. Because he was focused on cultivating his cultivation technique, he didn't have the heart to slowly choose disciples. Thus, he chose Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan. Firstly, the 2 of them were quite talented and ranked 2nd and 3rd respectively in the competition. They could be considered outstanding. Secondly, Elder Zhu's lifespan was coming to an end, and he didn't have any backing. Coincidentally, he had offended him before, so he had a good excuse to make things difficult for him. He wasn't afraid that the other wouldn't agree. This matter didn't require the other to change masters, and it was beneficial to both sides. Any intelligent person would know how to choose. Elder Zhu thought it over and over again and felt that he couldn't refuse Zhang Yan. Otherwise, with the other's current status, if he wanted to make things difficult for them, his 2 disciples wouldn't have an easy time in the future. Perhaps even his reincarnation would be ruined. Thus he sighed and said, "That's fine. It's their good fortune to be under the Chancellor's tutelage. It's better than following a useless master like me." Zhang Yan let out a smile when he saw that Zhu Yan had agreed. "Senior brother Zhu, don't worry. If your 2 disciples follow me, I won't let you and your disciples suffer any losses." After thinking it through, Elder Zhu was also very straightforward. He bowed his head and said, "After Daoren returns, I will order my 2 disciples to come pay their respects to Patriarch Zhang and establish a contract to become disciples of the Bright Nether Palace." Zhang Yan couldn't help but smile. It really wasn't tiring to speak with someone who understood things. He didn't need to waste any more words to understand the other party's intentions. He said, "Elder Zhu, your 2 disciples can come to my residence at any time. However, I heard that your reincarnation is imminent, so there's no need to be in such a rush. They can come find me after everything has been settled, so that your 2 disciples won't blame me in the future." Elder Zhu hurriedly said, "Of course not, of course not. The Chancellor is giving them a favor. How can we not know what's good for us?" Zhang Yan nodded and didn't say anything more. Elder Zhu knew that he was sending off his guests, so he bowed his head and excused himself. Zhang Yan thought to himself, with these 2 disciples entering the sect, adding on the disciples of his own residence, the Bright Nether Heavenly Lakes lineage could grow in the future. With a bright laugh, he transformed into a wisp of smoke and returned to the small pot mirror, preparing to break through the shell barrier with all his strength. Chapter 358. Breaking through the shell was an extremely dangerous matter. In the Qinsong school, when the disciples did this, most of them would be protected by their seniors and would give them pointers from time to time. This was to prevent them from damaging their foundation if they were careless. This was especially so for the disciples who had formed the upper 3 grades of Dan. It was already not easy to cultivate to the core transformation realm. With such an achievement, one had to be even more careful and cautious. It was like walking on thin ice. Zhang Yan's Dan had formed the 1st grade, which was extremely rare. As for how to break through the shell, there was no one who had experienced it before. Even the enlightened Master Dong Tian was helpless and could only rely on himself. Previously, when he was in Jing Luo Academy, he looked through many books and there were many that explained in detail how to break through the shell. However, it was not of much help to him. For example, the people who wrote these books were mostly cultivators who had formed the middle 3 grades of Dan. Among them, there was no lack of cultivators who had formed the lower 3 grades of Dan. It wasn't that there wasn't anything that could be used as reference, but it was too little. However, he wasn't worried. With the remnant of the jade in his hand, he could just boldly try it out. He would be able to sort out some clues. It would just take a little more time. The matter of breaking through was especially important. It was related to his achievements in the future, so he couldn't be disturbed at all. Therefore, he told the mirror spirit that no matter what happened in the mansion, she could deal with it first and not to disturb him. He also ordered her to open the restriction formation inside and outside of the clear Serenity Heaven Lake mansion. He then hid in the true artifact small kettle mirror and opened the door. After making all the preparations, he took out the remnant of the jade from his sleeve and immersed his mind into it. The jade clone suddenly sat up and opened its eyes, which flashed with a touch of intelligence. Zhang Yan moved his limbs a little and looked at the golden core. He stared at the layer of the shell as if he was looking for a flaw. This shell membrane was now like colored glass, slightly jade in color. It was transparent from the inside out, with 9 distinct orifices, and was as thick as a finger. Even when the core evil chi entered or exited, it could not damage it in the slightest. Instead, it received the turbid chi from the Jindan and became even more solid and solid. He pondered for a moment, then slowly gathered the core evil chi into the Jindan and circulated it. Then, after taking a few long breaths, he let out a low shout and used all his strength to push the core fiend chi against the shell membrane. There was a sudden muffled sound, like a muffled thunder beside his ears. In any case, they wouldn't be able to condense Fa Li and true seals for the rest of their lives, so the difference between a 7th and 9th rank core transformation realm wasn't big. Breaking through this barrier and reaching the 2nd rank was better than being a 1st rank core transformation realm cultivator. Zhang Yan thought for a long time and decided to try another method. This method was similar to the cultivators who formed the middle 3 ranks of the core formation. They would use water to grind away the aperture membrane bit by bit. After making up his mind, he calmed his mind and rotated the core evil chi, slowly grinding it on the shell membrane. Every time he removed a bit of evil chi would disperse. In order to not let the evil chi remain in his body and hinder his cultivation, he had to get rid of it. Thus, he rotated the core evil chi, and a bit of white gas came out of his mouth and nose and floated around him. With this method, 3 months passed in a flash. In these 3 months, he tried this method no less than 10 times, but in the end he found that this method still didn't work for him. His core had reached the 1st rank, and the shell membrane had reached a point where it couldn't be any stronger. It was tough on the inside and tough on the outside. Every time he rubbed away a bit, a large amount of core evil chi would also be lost. The further he went, the more core evil chi he needed. In the end, every time the shell membrane was just a little bit away from breaking, the core evil chi would be used up. But once he stopped and rotated the golden core again to produce core evil chi, the hole that was rubbed away would close up. Zhang Yan thought about it for a while, and was secretly shocked. This shell membrane only needed evil chi to replenish itself, and it had never left the body. Every bit of it was gathered together and had never been used up. But after the core evil chi was lost, it needed to be refined again, and with every bit of core evil chi, the shell membrane would become thicker. This meant that the more times a cultivator used core evil chi in the 1st rank of core transformation, the thicker the shell membrane would become. In the end, it would reach a point where no matter how much core evil chi was used, it would be impossible to break through. If one didn't find an opportunity to break through to the 2nd rank of core transformation, they would never have another opportunity. And the reason why the cultivators who had formed the 3rd rank of core transformation could pass this test was because they learned the techniques passed down by their masters. They knew how to use the core evil chi and how to change between hard and soft. This method was also recorded in the Luo Academy, and Zhang Yan had seen it before. It could be said that it was extremely complicated and included tens of thousands of methods. What kind of golden core had what kind of method to break out of the shell? This was a method that had been accumulated by countless cultivators for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. It was so detailed that the method used to break out of the core was different according to the years of formation. 30 years of formation had 30 years of formation, and 60 years of formation had 60 years of formation. As a disciple, he didn't need to think too much. He only needed to pick a suitable method and practice it. In short, As long as one wasn't extremely unlucky, they would most likely be able to pass this test. Zhang Yan thought for a while and felt that since those two methods weren't feasible, there was only one way for him to pass this test. That was the method of turning qi into a blade. The so-called turning qi into a blade. It was to master the way of using the core evil qi to change between hard and soft. The method of changing yin and yang, condensing the essence like steel, turning qi into a sword, and finally cutting open the shell membrane. This required one to slowly move the core evil qi, gather it in one place, and condense it into a point. There was no shortcut to this method, it was just hard training and practice makes perfect. The core evil qi was originally a vast amount of qi. Although it could change at will, to completely condense it in one place was extremely difficult. The more abundant the core evil qi, the more difficult it was to accomplish. One needed to slowly condense it, and then try again and again. It was unknown how much effort and time it took. It was said that great strength was difficult to be small. A person who could swing 1,000-pound stick might not be able to pick up an embroidery needle. Zhang Yan's core was of the first rank, and his core evil qi was vast and powerful. To achieve this step was even more difficult, and it required much more effort than a cultivator of the second rank. However, to achieve this step, one needed to repeatedly move the core evil qi. During this process of condensing qi, the core evil qi would be used up, and turbid qi would be produced. This would inevitably thicken the shell membrane. In the Qinsong school, the two cultivators who had reached the first rank of the core evil qi before him all received the inheritance of the secret method. In addition to their own little bit of luck, they were able to pass this test. However, the process was extremely dangerous and could not be described with words. Zhang Yan secretly rejoiced that he had the remnant of the jade and did not have to worry about this. All he had to do was repeatedly practice. Even if he did not succeed the first time, after practicing 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times, he did not believe that he would not be able to grasp the key to this method. After he made up his mind, Zhang Yan eliminated all distracting thoughts, concentrated, and immersed his entire mind into this Tao. Winter passed and spring came. Before he knew it, another year had passed. However, Zhang Yan had been inside the jade for more than 40 years. At this time, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were clear and sharp. After sitting in silence for a while, he loudly said, "The shackles of the cage cannot stop me." He stopped talking and let out a low roar. He turned his core evil qi, turned it into a blade, and slashed down. There was only a soft sound, like a sharp knife cutting through flesh or rotten wood. On the membrane of the shell, there was a slight crack that could not be seen. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed with a bright light, and he let out another loud shout. The boundless pill baleful qi pushed outwards, and with a loud bang, it was as if something heavy had been removed from his chest. His body couldn't help but feel light, and a feeling of freedom surged into his heart. He immediately understood that from this moment on, he had broken through the shackles, broken through the barrier, and stepped into the realm of the second level of the core transformation realm. Once the barrier was broken, his spiritual energy more than doubled. Zhang Yan felt that there was a tyrannical force in his body that seemed to be able to move mountains with a slight movement. He turned his core evil qi and spat out a long breath. The core evil qi brought out of his body, and from then on, it would no longer be trapped in his body. He laughed out loud, waved his sleeve, opened the array door, and flew out of the small pot mirror. Chapter 359. After Zhang Yan left the little pot mirror, because of the boundless core fiendish pill, he flew with the wind and clouds. He sat down in the master manner and retracted his aura. Instantly, there was a loud sound. This sound rumbled out, and everyone in the clear nether heavenly lake felt their feet tremble. The walls around them echoed, and only then did they realize that the manor master had come out of his meditation. Zhang Yan summoned the mirror spirit and asked, "When I was in seclusion, was there anything important?" The mirror spirit bowed and said, "Master, there was nothing important." It's just that 3 years ago, Luo Nyangzi left the residence and asked me to tell you that she was looking for a suitable disciple and that you don't have to worry about her." Seeing that Zhang Yan nodded slightly, the mirror spirit said carefully, "In addition, there is a small matter. The disciples of Elder Zhu, Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan have arrived at the residence. I have settled them down. Master, do you want to see them?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "There is no hurry. Let them stay there for now." He turned his head and waved his sleeves. The small pot mirror suddenly rippled and the scene in the residence appeared in front of him. He glanced around and saw that the Lu siblings and Monster King Junyu's cave room were faintly sealed. It was obvious that they were in seclusion. He couldn't help but nod. Among the three Monster Kings, Lu Mainyang and Jing Miaojuan were cultivators in the third level of core transformation. If one of them could break through to the Yuanying realm in the next few years, it would be greatly beneficial to him. He turned the mirror again and shone it on Tian Kuan's body. Zhang Yan looked over and saw that he was cultivating in the cave, and he seemed to be completely unaware of what was happening in the outside world. Then he looked at his cultivation. His progress was not fast or slow. In these 8 years, he had reached the second level of Clear Qi realm and was on the verge of breaking through. But looking at him, it seemed that as long as no one came to disturb him, he could continue to cultivate like this. Zhang Yan smiled. Among his 4 disciples, Lu Yinyi was intelligent and had her own opinions. However, he respected his master and respected his teachings, so there was no need for him to worry about anything. On the other hand, Tian Kuan was wooden and introverted, as if there was nothing in the world that could move him other than cultivation. As for the Wang sisters, they had yet to return to the residence after becoming lower house disciples, so no one knew how they were doing. Thinking of this, he suddenly realized that there was something he had to do. He had already been the lower house headmaster for 8 years. Calculating the time, to the lower house disciples, it was another 16 full years. Those who had reached the third level of essence condensation had reached perfection. He could already open his meridians and enter the upper house as a direct disciple. But today was different. When he had become the monastery head, he had set down a rule that all disciples of the lower house were not allowed to open their meridians without permission. Even if you managed to open your meridians without his stamp of approval, you would not be able to enter the upper house. Presumably, all the disciples were eagerly waiting for him to appear. As he thought of this, he smiled. After reminding the mirror spirit, he stepped out of the formation door and out of the cave. He flew out and turned into a long smoke as he flew to the lower house. He flew quickly and arrived at the rippling cloud peak in a flash. He issued a decree. Not long after, the 3 monastery heads hurried over to greet him. After talking with the 3 for a while, he had a general understanding of the matters of the lower house in the past 8 years. He ordered the children in the monastery to ring the bell. Not long after, the bell on the 18 peaks of Azure Parasol Mountain rang loudly, summoning all the disciples to come and meet him. Although he had not shown his face for 8 years, he was still shocked when he heard the sound of the bell. The bloody scene from 8 years ago flashed before the eyes of all the disciples of the lower house. Immediately, no one dared to be negligent. They immediately put down what they were doing and hurriedly rushed to Rippling Cloud Peak, afraid that if they were a step too late, they would lose their heads. After the bell rang this time, in less than half an hour, all 36 disciples of the lower house had gathered. Many of the disciples from aristocratic families felt uneasy. They did not know if Zhang Yan would torment them again. Zhang Yan's gaze swept across and saw that the Wang sisters were among them. His gaze paused for a moment, then swept over them. He looked at each disciple seriously, then said slowly, "Most of you have been in the lower house for 16 years. Today, a few of you will be promoted to become true disciples." When the disciples heard that not everyone could become true disciples, there was a slight commotion. However, when Zhang Yan looked at them, they all kept quiet out of fear and lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Zhang Yan was about to speak again when he suddenly saw a golden light flying over from the horizon. It turned in the air and flew towards him. He looked around and caught it. It was a letter. After opening it, he glanced at it, then put it in his sleeve. He thought for a moment, then said to the disciples, You can all go back to open your meridians. In 3 months, I will examine your meridians and choose the true disciples to send to the upper house. Today you are dismissed." The children in the monastery immediately rang the bell. With a long sound, the disciples hurriedly bowed and left. The aristocratic family's disciples all left worriedly. Only the 4 master and disciples were full of vigor. They fell a step behind the crowd, then bowed to Zhang Yan and left just now. The Wang sisters looked at each other. After the disciples on the peak had all left, they came up and bowed, saying in unison, "Disciples greet Master." They were all beautiful, and their voices were like orioles coming out of the valley. The children brought by the 3 monastery heads could not help but take a few more glances. Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. "In the 8 years that I was not here, there was no one to supervise you 2 sisters. But now it seems that you did not fall behind in your homework and your cultivation is not bad. Now I allow you 2 to return to the residence and find a jade elixir essence pool to open your meridians." There was no jade elixir essence pool in the clear serenity heavenly lake. When Lu Yenyi opened her meridians, it was Zhou Chongju who found it. As for Tian Kuan, his meridian's opening was different from others. It was originally a pot of jade medicine that Gui Songyao had refined for him. When his cultivation reached a certain level, he just had to drink it, so there was no need to look for it. But after annihilating the Su family, Zhang Yan obtained a continent. Not only did it have Disha, there were also a few top-quality jade elixir essence pools, which could be used on the 2 sisters. When the Wang sisters heard this, they were extremely happy. Wang Kaiwei was still fine. She was an introverted and reserved person, but the corners of her eyes could not help but show a hint of joy. And Wang Kading was a lively person, so she clapped her hands and cheered out loud. Zhang Yan saw that she revealed her true feelings and did not blame her. He smiled and said, "Senior brother has important matters to attend to. You all need to take care of yourselves." With a leap, he flew into the air and headed north. Wang Kading saw Zhang Yan fly into the air, a light white smoke as white as snow rolling around. Her beautiful eyes widened and she could not help but say enviously, "Sister, I wonder when we can be like Master, free like a bird." Wang Kaiwei was also lost in thought when she heard this. She looked at her reproachfully and said, "Sister, you are speaking without thinking again. How can you compare Master with a bird? You just need to cultivate well. After you open your meridians, Master will definitely pass down superior techniques to you. I think if you cultivate hard for a few years, you will also be able to fly into the cold jade." Wang Kading stuck out her little tongue. She came up and hugged Wang Caiwei's arm, giggling. Zhang Yan's trip was to Taoist Peng's cave abode, the Guardian Palace. When he arrived, he saw hundreds of disciples loitering outside the palace gates. He did not know what was going on. He could not help but feel surprised. At this moment, a Taoist nun came to greet him. Zhang Yan had seen her twice and could be considered an acquaintance. He pointed downwards and asked, "Fellow Taoist, outside the palace, why are there so many people?" The Taoist nun glanced over and curled her lips. She said disdainfully, "Aren't they all here to be apprentices? The senior sisters are all getting old, so they want to accept a few disciples to inherit their mantle." When they heard this news, they immediately came to visit. When they heard the news, they all came like a swarm of bees, wanting to squeeze into the door. Why don't they think about how easy it is to be a disciple of the Guardian Palace? Zhang Yan nodded his head in realization, thinking that it was no wonder. Taoist Peng's disciples, other than Qinen, were all maidservants from the clan. They were all maidservants originally brought from the clan. After hundreds of years, their lifespans were naturally coming to an end, so they needed to take in a few capable disciples. After a few years, they would be released so that they could reincarnate and enter the celestial sect. In the past, Taoist Peng kept a low profile. In addition, the Guardian Palace was originally a deserted place, so no one dared to rashly come to be his disciple. But now, it was no longer necessary. After the competition, Taoist Peng stood on the side of the master and disciple in a high-profile manner. His status in the sect had greatly increased, so naturally, countless disciples came to be his disciples. In the eyes of those disciples, even if they could not be Taoist Peng's disciple, it was also good to be the disciple of the Taoist Dong Tian. The Taoist nun led Zhang Yan to the hall and left. After a moment, Taoist Peng came to the hall with a dozen maidservants. But before he sat down, his phoenix eyes swept over Zhang Yan's face, and he said in surprise, "Have you broken through the shell?" Zhang Yan stood up, bowed, and said with a smile, reporting to Taoist Peng, "I was lucky to pass this test." Taoist Peng looked at him for a long time, raised his hand, and gently said, "Don't stand, sit down and talk." Taoist Peng had originally thought that Zhang Yan could break through the shell in 20 to 30 years, which was extremely fast. But never had she imagined that Zhang Yan would only use 8 years of time to emerge from his closed-door cultivation. This shocking speed imperceptibly caused her to be unable to help but have a higher opinion of him. Taoist Peng came to the main seat and sat down. He held the phoenix head chair with his lily-white hands, opened his red lips, and said, "In a few days, it will be the first day of the next month. There are more than 10 disciples in the sect who want to enter the small devil cave to cultivate. However, since Martial Nephew Zhuang came back from the small devil cave, no one has gone to suppress it for many years. There are many devils in the cave, so it needs to be cleaned up. However, I don't have many capable disciples, and Qinnan's cultivation is still too shallow. Therefore, I have to ask you to go and protect them so that they can return safely." Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. If it was just to protect the disciples, there was no need for him, one of the top 10 disciples of the sect, to take action. 1 or 2 core formation cultivators would be enough. With Taoist Peng's current relationship with the disciples, many people were willing to work for her. There must be other reasons. Therefore, he smiled and said, "Does Taoist Peng have any other instructions?" Taoist Peng waved his hand, and the maidservants behind him understood and withdrew, leaving only the 2 of them in the hall. Taoist Peng's expression slightly froze, and she said, "You met the disciples of the Bloody Soul sect in the small devil cave. After that, Martial Nephew Yuntan also sent a few elders to investigate, but they couldn't find the entrance. Now that the devil calamity is about to rise, this is a hidden danger. This time, you are going to escort the disciples, but if possible, you must find a way to find the entrance to avoid future troubles." She looked at Zhang Yan and said, "This matter was personally appointed by the sect leader. I hope you will not disappoint him." A glint flickered in Zhang Yan's eyes as he emotionally said, "The events of that year are still fresh in my memory. It was truly extremely dangerous, and in the end, only I, senior brother Xie, and junior brother Feng managed to escape. This is the territory of my Dark Azure sect, so how can the Blood Soul sect be so arrogant? Since it is the sect leader and Taoist Peng's care, I will accept it. I will definitely investigate this matter clearly." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.